We'll start. I want to welcome everybody to the Human Relations Commission meeting of October 12th, 2017, and begin with a roll call, please.
Commissioner Alasani?
Here.
Vice Chair Chen?
Here.
Commissioner Bomblack? Commissioner Gordon Gray? Commissioner Onan?
Here.
Commissioner Lee?
Present.
Chair Stinger?
Here.
Thank you.
Are there any agenda changes, requests, or deletions to the agenda before you? Thank you. If not, we'll move on to oral communications. The first card I have is Allison Cormack. Allison, there's a speaker to the right. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Allison Cormack. We have new neighbors next door. When I recently went over to welcome them, I thought about how much there is to learn when you move to a new city. Excuse me, particularly ours. Finding the nearest libraries and the hours it's open, personal favorite. Learning what to put in which recycling bin, that takes time, and which day your garbage is picked up. Figuring out which park has the best playground for your kids, knowing who to call if you have a problem with your utilities, understanding how street parking works, knowing if you have a neighborhood emergency preparedness contact, where they live, if you know a cool block leader, choosing the best bicycle routes, joining a neighborhood association, perhaps next door, choosing the best, understanding what's happening in the city, meetings like this, participating in what's happening in the city, reading the local newspapers. It's a long list. I'm coming to the last item. Knowing about our cherished traditions, from the May Fete Parade to the holiday lights on Fulton Street to Foothills Park summer camps. I'm here tonight to suggest that the city create a simple online welcome letter that answers some of these questions and includes a map of the city. Then people like me can download it, print it out, and walk over to share it with our new neighbors. The city could send it, perhaps signed by the mayor, whenever the name on a utilities bill changes, or on paper as a link. And then people interested in moving to Palo Alto would be able to read it in advance and know a little bit more about what to expect when they move here. Let's try to give our new neighbors a warm welcome when they arrive. This idea seems really well suited to this commission, and perhaps working with the Chief Communications Officer. I really don't think it would take that long to implement, so I hope you'll consider creating a helpful welcome letter for our new neighbors. Thank you.
Terry McCaffrey, please.
Well, my name is Terry McCaffrey. I'm area coordinator for Amnesty International in this area here. And the reason I'm coming to talk to you this evening is regarding refugee resettlement and welcoming refugee resettlement. In your August meeting, I came and I addressed this issue, and I distributed a copy of the resolution that we are interested in having passed by, addressed and passed by the Human Relations Commission. So basically, we have an Amnesty group meeting here, and I think we have about 20 people, and I sent a letter to the Commission Chair, Valerie Stinger, outlining our situation with a copy of co-signed people of about 10 or so people. So I'm saying at this point in time, the other things that I've done in regard to this issue I sent an email to Commissioner Lee. I also sent an email to your council liaison, and so this is where I'm asking your support. I want to kind of let you a little bit, give you a little bit more sense of this, because this issue of refugee or asylum seekers is a big issue right now with Amnesty. It's a national campaign, and so also we're looking at the climate now where we're not really having an open map for refugees or asylum seekers coming into this country. And it's reminiscent to me of 1939 where over 800 people in a boat, Jews, came to the United States and they were turned back, not allowed to enter. And we have now a climate here where we have a president is really discouraging people from coming into this country. So with that, I'm urging you to consider putting this issue on the agenda. I have a copy of the resolution here, and I did last time I was here, I spoke to the details of that resolution. So with that, I'd just like to distribute the copies and ask you, hopefully, that you can put this on your agenda and we can have a full discussion on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So here's the resolution if you want to distribute it. Thank you.
I see no other oral communication cards, so we'll move on to our first order of business. Thank you. And that's the Palo Alto Mediation Program. We have a long history with the Palo Alto Mediation Program. We've contracted with Project Sentinel to provide fair housing and mediation services in the community, and the Palo Alto Mediation Program is nested under Project Sentinel. The HRC established the mediation program years or decades ago, and we are authorized to approve changes in the bylaws and to approve the recruitment of new and returning members. And we welcome you here today and are anxious to hear your report.
Thanks. I'm happy to introduce us. My name is Karen Michael. That is Megan Gorman. We are currently the co-chairs of Palo Alto Mediation. And of course, I'm sure you all know Paul Hebert, who keeps the wheels on the bus for us down in Santa Clara at Project Sentinel. Megan and I are going to talk to you first about getting you to approve the results of our recruiting this year and a slight change to our bylaws, and then Paul will be giving the MRP report.
So just going to give you a brief sort of overview of the outcome of our recruitment this year. So we had 3 members who renewed: Karen Michael, Elaine Elbuzri, and Joyce Davidson. We have 1 new active member, Erica Harrington, and 1 new emeritus member, Andrea Werboff. And Erica, just to give you a little background, she has lived in Palo Alto since 2010. She was a transactional real estate attorney before starting her family and is currently a stay-at-home mom to 2 sons who attend Aloni Elementary. So now that her children are getting a little older, she has a little more time on her hands and wants to add community mediator to her volunteer efforts. So we're really happy that Erica has joined our panel of volunteer mediators. And I think that's sort of... Yeah. Okay.
Any discussion?
I read the bio that you provided on Erica, and I was really impressed with your recruitment efforts. I really liked that she was someone who was ready to volunteer in the community, and that she also had a background in law, which I think can sometimes be helpful when you undertake mediation training. So, kudos on being able to identify such great candidates for the mediation program.
And we can, if there are no other comments, we'll take a vote.
I think we need a resolution.
Could I ask a quick question? What is the current breakdown of folks who rent as opposed to own a home in terms of the people that you have as mediators?
We have no idea. We've never addressed that.
I think that would be a good question to ask, just so that we have a good representation as mediators, and also if they do own homes, how recent they've rented and where they've rented. If they've rented elsewhere in the Bay Area, that sort of would be a good perspective to gather.
Okay.
It's interesting because our role is to be neutral, so whether we own or rent, I don't know if that would be something we would. Do we need to add that?
Me? No, I was hoping Paul would say something.
So-
Here, Paul.
Want to side with the renter or side
Yeah,
with
no,
the
I
landlord?
think it's an insightful question. I think that renters might, if they were able to know that, might appreciate the split. But I think that having the perspective available for our monthly meetings of the renter as opposed to the owner would make a difference too. So it is, I sit and listen to renters all day long.
Yeah.
And so it is a very different world that they live in than the people who own. And it would be worthwhile. So I will find out and get that information to you. It won't be difficult. There's
Yeah, I
only,
mean, it would be good to know who rents, who owns, who maybe owns but rents out their properties. I mean, it'd be
Sure.
good to have that, that sort of information, and maybe down the road, maybe doing an en banc thing where you, instead of doing one mediator, you do 2 or 3, just to get different perspectives on that, potentially, since there seems to be quite a few mediators, but not many actual cases opened.
Well,
That might be a way to utilize
yeah.
some of that perspective.
And our practice is always to have 2 mediators.
Oh, great.
For a mediation session. And the way that they're assigned is by the availability, and if multiple people are available, then it goes to the one who has had the least opportunity so far to participate. So we try to balance the opportunity to mediate, but we haven't actively sought to know who's got that experience or another background. And I'm not sure. It would take some good discussion to decide whether that should be used to determine, to favor one mediator
Yeah.
over another.
I would imagine that if you had a renter and a landlord sort of as your 2 mediators, that might convince more parties to participate. If they knew that, someone shares their perspective, but there's 2 of them. Right.
It's an
I'd like to
interesting
add-
conjecture.
I've done over 100 mediations for Palo Alto, and it's never come up or been an issue. About 75 to 80% of our mediations are landlord-tenant, because we do have a lot of renters in Palo Alto. But it's, gosh, yeah, we just assign 2 random mediators to each mediation, and because we are neutral, there's really no discussion. I mean, it would be interesting information to have, but I'm not
Yeah.
quite sure how
I
it
mean,
would
if
apply.
you guys could discuss it, maybe next time you guys meet with us, let us know what were the fruits of that discussion. I would be interested in that.
I'm sure we can do that.
Great, thank you.
You have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve Erica as the new mediator for Palo Alto Mediation Program.
Second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No opposed? Thank you, and thank you for the recruitment effort and the mediation services that you provide.
You're very welcome. And I should add that we always get really good applicants. We're very impressed with the people of Palo Alto who raise their hand to do this. So we tried to bring on 3. We could only get the 1. But that's just because everybody has got so many opportunities to participate, and they've got to pick and choose.
Could I make another quick comment? It'd be very interesting for me to know the next time you meet with us, sort of what the demographic breakdown is of the mediators, just so that we know that the pool of mediators is representative of the population of Palo Alto, and of the folks who would use your services. So, yeah, thank you.
Do we need to get approval for Joyce and Elaine and me?
I think that's part of the form, so.
Okay.
So, May I make a motion then?
Please.
I'll make a motion then that we approve the new emeritus members of PAM. The renewed, I'm sorry, renewed, you're not emeritus, you're still here. The renewed members, please forgive me, of PAM, which are Karen Michael, Elaine, I can never pronounce those, Elbizri and Joyce Davidson.
And there is one new emeritus.
That's right, that's where I was confused. Andrea, yeah, okay. So I'd like to propose that, that we renew the approval for those 3 existing members who are re-upping.
I'll second that. Thank you. Thank you, vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And again, thank you for your work.
We are pleased to do it.
And you do it so well.
Well, we try. We do have pretty good success rates.
Wait, and do we need to vote on Andrea?
Yes.
Technically, yes.
Finally.
Oh, no, she was included in that last
Oh,
one.
she was improved in the last? Okay.
Yeah. So I would like to talk about the proposed change to our bylaws. During recruitment this year, we have a limit of 8 non-voting emeritus members. And I knew that Andrea was going to become emeritus, or I suspected it very strongly, and we already had 7. So that would fill us up, and we had a number of emeritus members who had been with us on that list for many years, but not participating. So the emeritus members, just like the regular members, need to re-up every 2 years. So we had 4 people who were coming up for review, if you will. And none of them, well, 3 of them did not choose to reapply. One of them had moved out of the area, so she was no longer eligible. But meantime, we took a look at our application for emeritus and what it said in the bylaws, and there were some discrepancies. So I don't know if you guys have this or if you want me to read it to you, but in the current bylaws, what it says about the non-voting members is that PAMP may also have as non-voting emeritus members up to 8 individuals, each of whom has served at least 1 term with PAMP as a voting member and who wishes to serve as an emeritus member, as that membership category is described in the PAMP policies and procedures. Well, first of all, it was not described in our policies and procedures. But more important, we wanted to make sure that emeritus members, even as they moved into the non-voting category, were still participating. And we've had some who have done a lot of that. Nancy Yend, some of you may know her because she's very well known, for a long time was doing a lot of training for us. And I know Andrea is going to be, who was the one who started our mentor program and was co-chair for many years. I know that she's going to be very active. So we reviewed what was there and what we actually had seen in the application for the emeritus members and came up with a new proposed section, which is now 3 paragraphs rather than 1. And I'm happy to read it if you need it, but the essence of it is that people who want to become emeritus have to have served 3 terms, not 1, so that's 6 years. And they need to commit to doing some ongoing activity for us. That's kind of the essence of it. I can, say what the activities could be for them if you want to hear it. I don't know if there's any interest in that. So the terms are the same. We didn't really change anything except that they needed to participate and they needed to have more of a tenure as a voting member before becoming emeritus. So that's what we are proposing to change. We voted on it and got well over our 2/3, and it needs to be voted on by you now.
Thank you. When I read this in the packet that we received, it struck me that this is a really important exercise in reviewing the policy manuals and the procedures on a regular basis to see if they still serve you well. And
We do that every year.
yes,
Can I ask,
please.
could I hear what the programs are that they have to participate in?
Sure. Participation can include, but will not be limited to, mediation. So somehow if a mediation request is out there and nobody's able to respond, then Paul will ask the emeritus members. So they're kind of the last stand for that. Conciliation, which is a telephone form of mediation. Case development, mandatory response program mediation eligibility, because they will definitely be eligible, and Paul will talk to you about that. Community outreach, recruitment, mentorship, training, and program advocacy and leadership. Thank you. Sure. Lydia, hi. She's a neighbor.
Is there any discussion?
I would say that I think this sounds like a really smart change to the bylaws, because I think organizations, as people move from category to category, can sometimes end up with either an unwieldy or, uncontrolled. It's almost like people hoarding, where you have people in all these categories, you don't know what to do with them anymore. And sometimes you have to, I hate to say this, but call the herd a little bit, and make sure that everybody's up to date and ready to go if you need them, and people who are not active really maybe need to move on or into some other role. So I think it sounds like a very intelligent way to make sure that people who are emeritus, it's not just a rubber stamp, but that they're still participating in some meaningful way in the organization, and gives them the role that they want to play, but that also works for the organization. So I'm supportive of the change, and as I said, I think it's a smart change.
Thank you.
May I have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the change to the bylaws for the Palo Alto Mediation Program for the emeritus members.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Too slow, Mitty.
A vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Thank you. Can I turn it over to you, Paul?
I reckon. Yeah. So the MRP report, first thing you may have noticed is that it's going from December or January to December. That has been the historical way that this report's been done. I'm not sure why it was set up that way, but that's what I stepped into. So, and this past year we didn't. It slipped by. Things were a little chaotic, and I missed it, and so we realized it, and we thought, all right, let's make sure that we do that thing. And then when I got down to creating the report, I realized just how much work there is to produce that report that's out of sync with all the other reporting stuff and our database. And so it took a lot of work to do it, and I did not have enough time in the database support to bring it up to October here. So I decided, all right, since the comparison between the previous year and the current year was already a major piece of the report, I would preserve the January to December time slice. I did hear that you were interested in some of the data from this past January to the present, and I did make an attempt to find that information. I'd like to give just a little bit of a backdrop, too, so that you understand that things at Project Sentinel have been a little unsettled for the last couple months, because we had a director for a year and a half, and she decided to move along. That was Sandra De La Tour. And we hired a replacement, and 1 week into his tenure, he died of a heart attack. And so we scrambled, and so we now have someone new who just started this past week, but I'm a little swamped. So let me just describe a little bit what's in here from the comparison of the 2 prior years. It's the case that, and the other thing I think I've described each time, I'll say again, is that when people call and their case could apply under the mandatory response program, which is limited to a subset of the tenant-landlord issues that can be disputed, and it's also limited to landlords who have 2 or more rentals within the city. So some people whose issue might be covered by MRP can't do it because the landlord has only 1 door for rent in Palo Alto, or they have a duplex and they live in half of it. So there are those pieces, and what I tell people is you could demand mediation or you could ask for mediation. And you're the one who knows your landlord-tenant relationship. I don't know it. I don't know the people involved. So you're the one that gets to decide. My first job here is to make sure you understand the choice you're making. And I always add in that, in my opinion, it's easier to start a difficult conversation with a request than a demand. So that's my suggestion to them. But if they don't think their landlord will cooperate without that extra pressure, that's their choice, and I send them the petition. So far, since January to now, and if you look at the data here, very few people actually return the petition. So you'll see that I sent 20 petitions packets out this year. I only got back 4. Last year, we sent out fewer petitions and we got back more of them. So 12 and 9 people actually filled out the petitions and requested the service under that element of the ordinance. So my experience is, and the one other thing that I tell them is there's not too much hazard to making the request for mediation. If there's a doubt in your mind, if the landlord does not respond to the request, we can turn around and you can submit the petition. There's a time limit, and as long as that petition comes in under the time limit, you can escalate to a demand. So that's how I introduce their option to them. Most tenants choose to make an invitation. Most landlords in Palo Alto accept those invitations without much of a fuss. So that's a little bit of backdrop for the numbers that you see. MRP hardly ever has a lot of cases in any given year. This year it's down significantly. It's less than half the number of cases that were pursued that way. The other thing I would say is that in this particular time slice, there were some unusual landlord-tenant difficulties, and there is one other provision in the ordinance where if a landlord fails to show up or participate in a mandatory response request, my job is to notify the city attorney and let them handle that. And so I have had to do that once this year, and that's kind of a rare occurrence. I don't know that you can draw very many conclusions from such a tiny data set, but my experience sitting in the answer man chair is that for the most part, Palo Alto landlords are very willing to participate in the mediation program, and they value it. So we don't have to twist their arm, and if there's someone whose arm we do have to twist, they may not anyway. So that's my sense of it. I don't know, regarding the distribution, again, the data set is so small, it's hard to draw any conclusions about trends and things from this. So I'd like to just open it up and ask if there are questions about the report. I haven't made too many additional conclusions because of that.
I had a question about the nature of the cases that you've been asked to mediate. I think the last time you reported to us, you mentioned that you were seeing more and more sort of family disputes that were coming to you, out beyond landlord and tenant. So is that still a trend, or are there other trends that we should be aware of?
I don't think I perceive an escalation this year in the pure community mediation requests. There are always some sprinkled in there. We get neighbor disputes around landscaping and fences. Occasionally, we get them around parking. So those are some of the complaints that happen, and these are neighbors. I heard the request for a welcome package, and some neighbors have landed next to someone that they don't mix well with, and so that difficulty, they'll escalate if they know about us. We do our darndest to make sure they do know about us, but we don't still get that many of those. That material, that breakdown is in the annual report that you'll be getting, or you just got in July. I didn't bring a copy of that with me, so I don't have those numbers in my head. I have almost nothing in my head. But I'd be happy to answer questions if I can.
I have one question, but also I'm sure you guys are already on this, and I obviously defer to Councilmember Koo, but because city staff emailed about it today, on Monday the city council is looking at renter protections and maybe doing some rejiggering of renter protections. I think obviously they would value your experience and on this issue, having dealt with landlord-tenant issues a lot. But two, I'm sure that there might be implications for the number of cases that you guys see. Maybe something gets passed that gives one side more rights, and maybe the phone starts ringing more often or something like that. But so just put it on your radar for Monday. But the question I was going to ask is, are you still seeing a decent amount of Airbnb-related cases or something similar to that, or not really?
No, this year I did not see so many of those. The year before, they were noticeable. But this year, I have not had any that I recall that were related to Airbnb issues. And the issues typically are from neighbors. So that's one that will show up as a neighbor issue because the Airbnb activity has a lot of different people going down the street. Parking is sometimes a problem, and parties is sometimes a problem. But no, this year, I don't recall any Airbnb cases.
Thanks so much again for everything.
I just had a question. How do you see the overall landlord-tenant relationship, given the media buzz about renters and hardship, and this is Palo Alto, and I'm just sort of curious the overall mood or relationship?
Well, so I cover, in Project Sentinel, the cities of Palo Alto, Los Gatos, and Campbell. And all three of them have renter-specific ordinances, which are quite different. You may be aware that Los Gatos has got a rent control ordinance that limits rent increases to 5% and has some exception clauses that a landlord can use. So they have tackled what is being proposed by the thing that I saw earlier this week. The Campbell ordinance is not restricting rent in any particular way, but it does provide for something akin to what you have here in Palo Alto, which is a process where a tenant can demand some face time with the landlord and can also demand an evaluation from a city panel on the reasonableness of a rent increase. But the opinion of the panel does not constrain the landlord.
Who makes up the panel?
That is constructed on demand. It rarely happens. So most tenants, so the Campbell ordinance provides for conciliation first, and then mandatory mediation if the tenant requests it, and then a fact-finding panel if the tenant requests that, having been unsatisfied with mediation. The fact-finding panel really won't look at a rent increase that's less than 7 or 8%. And sometimes tenants will present a complaint at lower than that. We had one this year, and the city was looking at it and said, it's very unlikely that the panel would ever decide in the tenant's favor in such a small increase. So there's 3 different ordinances or sets of ordinances. They're all trying to tackle in some way the same problem. My experience of most large landlords understand the ordinances, take some pains to know about it, and they participate willingly in the program. Where you get more friction is from the small landlords who have not, who have inherited or invested in a property, and they're nouveau landlords, and they don't quite take the pains to learn all that stuff, so they sometimes are being educated through our program. But I don't find any of them actively difficult or antagonistic towards tenants. I think most of them understand that tenants are their business. However, there is always a tension between their business objectives and the tenant's stability objectives. And when we mediate, that's in front of us, but we don't constrain them. Los Gatos does constrain them, and occasionally the tenants use that to their advantage. I don't know if I answered your question completely. That's a ranging question, and there'll be lots of discussion coming up based on what I've read.
Can I add something to that? So he takes all the phone calls and gets all the problems. As a mediator, and I volunteer a lot, I've done quite a few of the Palo Alto cases. And I have I don't recall doing anything within the last couple of years related to a rent increase. It's usually, certainly a large percentage of them have to do with security deposits. So that is where most of the disputes are. They're just not coming in. Are you getting, yeah.
Last year, there was
So I-
several related to the increase in rainfall that led to habitability. So last year, an interesting, I thought, trend was because there was that, vast amount of rain, and so homes tended to become more moldy, and so that was one of the reasons why tenants requested mediation, because they felt that there were habitability issues. So that was an interesting sort of shift in what the sort of reason for mediation is, or at least last year. Wonder what it'll be like this winter.
Given your experience in the three cities and maybe familiarity with some of our other neighboring cities, would you find the number of mediations low or high or on par with the other neighboring communities?
So Palo Alto is more active than either Los Gatos or Campbell. Mountain View is a very special case these days, and so it's really hard to compare there. But the Mountain View program, I think, is similarly active in terms of mediation. I haven't ever compared the numbers with Mountain View. And then Palo Alto, or Project Sentinel, has invited mediators from those three panels to be part of a general panel that we have to support cities like Sunnyvale and Santa Clara that do not have their own panel. And so mediations there happen as often as we can promote it. I'm always, why don't you try mediating? So when I get a call, I tell people the rules, and I feel like an arms dealer. And then I stop and I say, however, I find that it's much better if you're able to sit down and communicate with your landlord rather than just go beat them up with the rules. So we're always promoting it. A surprisingly low number of people actually will step into that unfamiliar space. So I don't think that we're terribly low. The MRP numbers don't reflect the general mediation numbers in Palo Alto. So the July report that you just got, that will reflect more what's our norm, and we're about the way we have been, a little bit lower than last year.
So I noticed that this year you received 145 phone calls that are potentially within the MRP scope. But of that 145, only 20 had requested the MRP package. I'm wondering if you had any insight as to why that sort of number was so low.
So that's an interesting, this particular data point is a difficult one to collect. What we collect is, we always have in our database the type of dispute, whether it was deposits or maintenance or, whatever. There's about 20 different things that we have as categories. And so for it to be a call which is potentially within the scope, excuse me, my chai is running out.
Hold that thought.
Don't drop dead of a heart attack.
I'm good.
Don't want to lose another one.
So for it to be potentially an MRP, all it has to be is not about termination. And the landlord has to have 2 or more rentals in the community.
Mm-hmm.
So I search the database for that combination, and I come up with 145. In most of those conversations, I'm the one promoting mediation as opposed to them asking for it. And when I promote it, it rarely goes to the mandatory question. So that's my understanding of why that number is so different. For the most part, when somebody calls me and says, I need my landlord to sit down with me and talk about this stuff, then the MRP conversation will come up. Oh, thank you. So that's my explanation. I don't have a better one.
So it sounds like majority of the calls that potentially fall within the scope, they're not really asking for mediation services. You're the one who's kind of suggesting it to them.
Yes.
What sort of help are they asking for when they do call you and they're not asking for mediation services?
Well, almost every call involves a question about what are my rights.
Okay.
So a tenant will call and ask, what are my rights? A landlord, and if you look at the numbers, nearly a third of my callers are landlords. And I attribute that partly to some outreach that we did in the last couple of years to small landlords in Palo Alto. And they're asking, what can I do about this? So I have a difficult tenant, what can I do? So that's where the conversation begins. That's why I said sometimes I feel like an arms dealer, because they're asking me for how do I resist what my landlord appears to want. Occasionally they're saying, I've requested this, or I've identified this problem in the house and the landlord's not doing anything. Does he have to? And it's a very interesting conversation because for many complaints, the landlord is not compelled to repair them. Only for those complaints where it drops the unit below a minimum habitability standard, does the landlord, can they be compelled? And then I go into a description of what it takes to compel. So I spend a lot of time educating tenants about what their rights are and how to apply them, and landlords about how the civil code requires them to handle something, and my recommendations based on my experience about how they could, one of them always being you can invite the tenant to mediation. So that's the essence of 95% of my conversations at the start.
And in terms of capacity, it seems like you guys have a lot of mediators. Do they have excess capacity right now? Can they handle more mediation sessions, or are they?
Yes, I would say we could handle more requests.
Okay.
We have 19 now, 20 mediators.
What would that all count?
Oh, 21. There, we got 21. And I rarely have to ask twice. So so you understand, when somebody requests mediation, I send out a letter to both parties, and then I tap the panel and I say, who's available to do case development? And I'll usually get at least 2 or 3 hands in the air. And then if case development results in a mediation scheduling, then I request for a co-mediator. And again, there will be 2 or 3 hands in the air at least, sometimes 4, 5, and 6. It's an avid panel. So there is extra capacity. If I could convince more people to request it, and after 4 years, I thought I was good at it, but I could always get better.
So in terms of when you're doing sort of the majority of your calls where you're educating folks as opposed to them requesting mediation, do you find that your conversations with them prove useful to them, or?
Yeah, the tenants are uniformly grateful that there is that service.
Yeah.
A lot of times, I don't have good news for them. Right, so, when I get calls, I had a call today about someone who was terminated and misunderstood the termination notice, and so packed up her things and left 2 weeks later. And that put her in jeopardy of having to pay rent beyond what she hoped. So a lot of times, the education is not what they want to hear. But, yeah, they're always glad to know. And there are a lot of landlords who do not know.
And what does your capacity look like right now? I'm guessing you don't have
I'm
excess
up to
capacity.
here.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Right now, but that's a function of just, we had, besides the difficulty we had with our director passing, we've had 3 other staff people move on, and so we're still trying to build that back up. And the missing director actually slowed that process down. We actually have an offer being made this week, and hopefully that will get us back up to the staff complement we think we need. But we've been operating below it.
So when you have a full complement of staff, are you able to respond to all of the calls, sort of the education calls that you get?
Our Commitment is to respond within 24 hours. It's sometimes slipping down to 48, but I never finish a week without getting back to everybody. So we have the capacity. It's less stressful when I don't have as many calls as I have right now.
And are you able to leverage any of the mediators who obviously have an interest in serving in this capacity for some of the stuff that you have been doing?
So some of our mediators have some experience helping out in a voluntary, or actually in a paid way at Project Sentinel when someone takes vacation or things like that. We have, and at Palo Alto, the mediators take on the case development. So from the moment somebody indicates an interest in mediation, I can hand that off. In Los Gatos and Campbell, I do the case development. And so that workload is still with me on those two cities. So I would love to have those cities have panels that were willing to take on that additional load. But right now I don't.
But would they be able to answer the calls or anything like that? Or is that sort of
So
outside?
I
that's,
think we're into micro.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we got it.
Okay.
You're welcome to call me anytime, and I will be glad to have a call with a happy caller.
And I think it would be important to sort of differentiate Paul's role as the Project
That's a good
Central
point.
administrator compared to the role of the volunteer mediators. So they're very different roles, and so he has to, sometimes he wears two hats, but he has a distinction between, I'm giving you information, and then if I am going to do case development, correct me if I'm wrong, you are neutral from start to finish. But with this other role, he's actually providing information to the tenants or the landlords that can help them. So it's sort of seen as advocacy, which is different than mediation, which is completely neutral. We can't do our jobs well if we show any kind of favor towards one of the or the other parties. They lose trust in us, and we can't facilitate a dialogue that brings them to a mutual understanding. But it's very
Well,
different from Paul's role at Project Sentinel as an administrator. And I didn't know if you knew that, but I was also thinking, I don't know if you agree, we could invite you to one of our monthly meetings.
That'd be fantastic.
And you
Yeah,
could learn
yeah.
a lot about some of the questions you
That's a
Well, great.
great
Well, thank you
idea.
so much for spending some extra time.
You're welcome.
Well, with the workload and the two hats, thank you for being such avid. So- Yeah,
We're all glad to do what we do.
and we're very appreciative of your services to the city.
Yes, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On behalf of council also, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minka. So this year, we had an extraordinary HISRAB funding allocation process. Normally, we send out for RFPs, and we recommend allocations for funding, and then we send them to Finance and to full council. This year, we had an unexpected withdrawal of a fairly large agency, Adolescent Counseling Services, and we also got an unexpected increase from council, and that left us with approximately $156,000 in remainder funds that we had to allocate, which was actually a happy task for us to finally have some extra dollars that we got to send to consider. So we sent out a second RFP process, and we had 8 applicants, and the selection committee met a couple of times to review all of those applications. And the funding allocations that we're recommending are for the smaller agencies, as you'll see. I think you all have the sheet in front of you at places. I'll talk you through kind of what our thinking was and be happy to take questions or comments afterward. We had a new agency, Parka, come to us for the first time, and we were excited about bringing them into the HISRAP family because they work with developmentally disabled adults. And we have heard many times from the community that there are parents of adult children who would like their disabled adult children to be able to live independently, and they're very much in need of this type of service. So we were excited about bringing this agency on board, and we recommended funding for them. We have also worked over the years with Vista Center for the blind and visually impaired. They do great work in the community, and we're aware that there's an increasing need for visual aid services. We have a growing number of seniors, and we have many people who have, for example, diabetes-related retinopathies who are losing vision at earlier and earlier ages. So one of the key indicators for people being able to stay independent in their own homes is the ability to see. So we felt that it was important to fund Vista at a higher level than we have in the past, so we recommended an additional $15,000 in funding for them. Another existing agency is Momentum for Mental Health. They are unique in that they do outreach to mentally ill homeless people in Palo Alto. The caseworker spends a certain number of hours per week here in our community, and with an additional grant, we are hopeful that that person can spend a few more hours per week in our community. So although we couldn't meet the full funding request, we did suggest or recommend another $10,000 of funding there. CARA is a new agency to HISRAP. We were able to give them a very modest approximately $8,000 grant in the first round. They came back to us in the second round. Although they're an unproven agency at this time, we do have confidence in them and hope that with an additional grant of another $10,000 for a total of $18,000 between the first and second rounds, they can go out and do some meaningful work in the community. And when we hear back from them, after this first HISRAP cycle, we'll have a better relationship with them and then see where we are in terms of future funding requests. Dream Catchers, and I see Barbara here, is one of our agencies that I think we all feel very proud of. We took them into the HISRAP family just a few years ago, gave them a very small grant, and over the last few years we've watched this agency really blossom. They've done a fantastic job with their new ED, Barbara Klausner, who's here, and they submitted a request for an additional $10,000 to fund a new staffing position that will coordinate their volunteers and make their efforts even more efficient. So that's exactly the kind of thing that HISRAP is designed for. We all felt very good about that request, so we recommended full funding for that request of $10,000. Okay, then we had approximately $100,000 left that hadn't been allocated. These were all the smaller, more discrete requests. Then we had 3 fairly large requests, and we had to grapple with these a bit more. All 3 agencies serve vital needs in the community. CASI was the new agency replacing adolescent counseling services in the schools, and the HRC has had a long-time commitment to youth well-being and to suicide prevention. So we do feel strongly about supporting an on-campus counseling program. Community Working Group, we hadn't worked with directly before, but they are the administering body for Life Moves, which is an agency formerly known as Envision Shelter Network, which serves the homeless population that we feel very strongly needs our support. We already support Life Moves through previous HISRAP and current HISRAP grants and through CDBG funding, but we understand that there are some administrative needs and budget deficiencies from Community Working Group, which is now going to funnel all of the funding that ultimately goes to Life Moves. This is our understanding. So that's obviously a critical need for the community. And Downtown Streets team, which we have worked with for many years and whose work we fully support, had a new project, which is the administration of the food closet, which is the only source of food for many of the low-income and homeless people who live in the downtown area and other parts of Palo Alto. So obviously food is a critical biological need that we want to support. So this was a challenge because all 3 agencies really do important work. At the same time, all 3 applications were somewhat flawed and somewhat hard to understand at times. And so we had to kind of go back for clarification on some issues and try to figure some things out with them. At the end of the day, the breakdown that we came up with is as follows. We decided to fund a large chunk of Cassie's request, which instead of $50,000, $40,000, so that they could get started with their counseling mission in the secondary school level. For Community Working Group, we recommended funding at the $25,000 level. We're hoping that that seed money from the City of Palo Alto will also help them attract grants from the county, which will help them make up their budget deficit. And for Downtown Streets team, we recommended funding of $34,600, which is a fairly large chunk of the amount that they requested, in the hope that that will help them stabilize the administration of the food closet and be able to keep it open, because we do feel that that's very important. Obviously, there wasn't enough money in the pot to fund everybody at the full level that we would, of course, love love to do. But we do think that in these distributions, that the agencies can all take enough money from HISRAP to hopefully go out there and do great work in the community. We have so much confidence in them. And so that is what our recommendations are as of now, and obviously open to discussion now from my colleagues on the HRC.
So I would just have, just questions at this point, questions of clarification, and then we'll go to the comments, and then you can have a discussion and make any decisions about recommendations.
That's where I was going. Any questions? Questions to Jill as a representative of the committee? Okay, I'll move on to the speaker cards, and then we'll have discussion. I have two people from Cassie, or maybe it's three, Cheryl and Genevieve? Genevieve, I'm sorry. No, it's not. Genevieve and Cheryl.
You come here and you'll have 3 minutes, or if you each wanted to take.
There you go, ladies. Commissioners, thank you for having us. I just came to give you a few little notes about what Cassie's been doing since we started at the secondary school. So as many of you are aware, based on our presentation and our proposal, we have been in Palo Alto for some time now, but we were really fortunate to partner for the secondary schools this year. And so I just wanted to give you an update on how that's going. Within the first 2 months of school, our 9 staff members at 5 of the secondary schools have provided ongoing support to more than 250 students at those schools. In addition to consulting with their teachers, parents, and they're supporting the school wellness as a whole, being out there for the kids, being out on campus, being a part of the regular day-to-day activities that they're going through. We just want to thank the City of Palo Alto and all the commissioners for recognizing this work and being our partners in the mental wellness of the youth in Palo Alto, and we're inspired by the partnerships that we have with the schools and the larger community. And we really look forward to the opportunity of working a little bit deeper in those schools together. So this has given us that opportunity, and we do appreciate it. I want to introduce Genevieve, who's one of our rock stars. She is our site supervisor out at Gunn. And I thought, just in case you had any specific questions about what goes on those campuses, I am just one of the people that supports these amazing staff members as the Director of Operations, but she's one of the people that's boots on the ground. So if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer any questions for you.
I had a question for Genevieve. I was very, very sad to learn of a suicide that occurred like the very first day of school at Gunn. My next door neighbor is a student at Gunn, and he didn't know this student who took his life, but he's talked about how down everybody was to start the school year on such a sad note. I'm just wondering, how are you helping the kids get through that?
Absolutely. So it was a very difficult day, second day of school, and we were all new to the school environment as well, being Cassie with ACS being there last year. So we did a lot of crisis intervention and support. We opened up the Wellness Center. The Wellness Center is open from 8 to 4. We support before and after school. We've also, I myself have done a lot of work with the parents, so I attend parent nights. I've done things through the Junior Parent Network as well to educate just about suicide prevention, about signs of depression, about adolescent development, and the differences kind of between our normal signs that we see and kind of more of our warning signs and things that we need to be paying attention to as parents and as families, and how we support our kids, and then working with the staff as well, and teachers specifically, as well as admin staff, and really talking about how are kids presenting in class. What are they looking like when they're leaving your classroom? What kind of things are kind of going on around that, so that you can send them to the Wellness Center so that we can support and provide risk assessment and kind of do the additional mental health piece as well, and trying to kind of boost morale around our teachers, because it was a big blow for a lot of them as well, to kind of have that happen right at the beginning of the school year, and just really feel very thrown off and anxious. And I think that we've kind of been operating in a very anxious environment for the last month or so, and I think the last couple weeks things have kind of settled in a little bit, and our drop-ins have reduced a little bit too. So but we offer drop-in support as well as the ongoing counseling support and services.
We have 3 full-time staff members, actually. 2.5.
We have 2.5. So I'm
staff
full-time.
members.
Yeah, we have 1 more full-time
At the
and
high
2
school
part-time.
level, but we were also able to deploy additional staff members out to the campus that we, in
helped a
response
lot.
to the crisis, so that we could be there to really support. So it was a tough way to start the school.
It was a tough way to start school year, yeah, but we were all hands on deck. We even had some support come from Palo from our Cassie team there. They came out to support us again as well,
I
so.
actually think we also invited Cara to come out.
Yeah.
And provide support not only on the campus, but to our staff members who may have needed that additional support because it was a high crisis.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, and thank you all for the agencies for collaborating, for doing such a great job to helping the kids
We're happy
and
to be there.
the staff get settled back down.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Hi, I'm Kyle Morgan with Downtown Streets Team. I'm the project manager of our work experience program in Palo Alto. Many of you probably know about Downtown Streets Team, and we're very grateful for all of your support in the past years and this current year and future years as well. In Palo Alto, we operate a work experience program, so we believe that we can help people step from one place to another place. But one of the programs that we have taken on is the food pantry, because we also understand that there are people who need consistent help day in and day out, and we believe that food is a vital part of life. And last month alone, we helped about 400 unique individuals at the food pantry. One of the things that our funding that we already get from the city through CDBG and HISRAP and some other sources, they don't cover the food pantry. So we took on operations prior to 2007, and we've been fundraising for that outside of our other funding sources. And so this year we're asking for additional funding to help us with some of the deficit that we saw last year in the food pantry. And we're working on a new development team that we've hired, a director of development, so that we can work on fundraising goals for next year and future years as well. And I wanted to say thank you for your support and your recommendation for the Downtown Streets Team, and we're very grateful for all your support. Thank you. Okay.
Barbara Klausner, please.
I'm sure I have to bring this down. So I wanted to thank the selection committee for the recommendation, the hearty recommendation to fully fund our request. We really appreciated. We're really excited to be able to build on the HISRAP funding that we've gotten in the past, as the chairwoman mentioned. That was really focused on the low-income middle school students who attend school in Palo Alto Unified, and that has always been the focus of our support. With your help, we've really grown the program. It's an incredibly strong program. And now this year, as I say, is the year of the tutor. We're continuing to focus very carefully on the students, but really we started to realize the benefit to the high school students who were volunteering and being paired one-on-one with our middle school low-income kids, and the benefit that they were getting. We were getting these unsolicited comments about how meaningful it was for the high school students. So we're super excited about that. And I really have the sense that you, as a committee and as a commission, really do share the vision that we have, that we're very excited about for the youth of Palo Alto, because putting these kids together, this is over 100 kids in our community that are building a one-on-one, year-long relationship, and they're in a group together, so it's not just one-on-one. We see Pali kids bonding with gun kids, with Stanford students, along with the middle school kids that they're working with. So we love it. We see the kids who are, some of them are at risk of feeling marginalized in their school communities. Some of them are feeling overwhelmed with schoolwork and wondering, kind of like, what is this all for? And we're giving them, both of them, sort of an opportunity to feel better about themselves and feel like they have some kind of meaning and purpose. I wanted to mention this because this is my opportunity to share with you a little bit. I love this. I always mention this in things that I write about, which is one of the ways we try to connect them is through technology called Slack. And I was just thinking to myself, you're the Human Relations Commission. You really understand the importance of relationships, which is really what our program is about. But I was thinking, Steve Jobs is not really good with personal relationships from what I read in his biography, but thanks to the iPhone and my iWatch and his technology, we use it heavily to connect our students to each other. So there's this thing called Slack, and I don't know if you guys have ever used it. Yeah, he's like nodding, yeah. And so we use Slack, and what it does is for every single one of our students, we actually, so this is a list of all of our middle school students. Of course, I'm not going to really show you what it says, but for each and every one of them, we have a private posting site. And so I'm trying to find, I won't tell you his name, but a student. And it's the kind of thing where it's about the middle school student, but we have, so here's what one of our tutors just said. See, there's so many, I can't even see them. Okay, I'm not sure if it's he or she, says, hello, I'm excited to be working with my student again. So this is a pair that carried over from last year. I've noticed his binder is kind of falling apart, even though he's done as much as he can to keep it together. It looks like it was definitely a quality binder at one point in time. So I don't know if you guys know middle school, it's like really important. Your binder is where you have like, it's like all of your assignments, and you're supposed to keep it really neat, and you're learning like work habit skills and study skills and time management. So she says, or he or she says, I was wondering if it's possible for us to help him buy a new one. If not, no worries. I just figured I'd ask. And then our program director, Miguel, responds, definitely. This is a level of detail. Is it one of those zipper ones or just a 3-ring binder? And then the tutor responds, it's a pretty big zipper one. So, you know, we really mean it when we say we customize our support, and that these are real relationships that are being developed between, you know, these young people. So, again, thank you so much for your support, and if you have any other questions, I am happy to answer them.
So I'm Jim Santucci. I am the executive director with CARA, and I just wanted to first say thank you for the recommendation for continued support. I really was encouraged when we were approved in the first round, and even more so with the additional amount in the second round. So many of you know CARA has been around the community for over 40 years now. And grief work is a very quiet type of work. It's not like we're knocking on doors asking people if they need grief support. My mantra is I want people to know us before they need us. And I want to have really strong partnerships with the community. And answer, Jill, to your question after the suicide in the first day, something the school district did that I was very encouraged by. They took the initiative, they reached out to us, saying, we want to help our parents, help the kids. And so we had 2 separate education nights for the parents in the community. And the first night we had over 40 people for gun parents, and the next one we had around 20 or 30 for the Palo parents. But that's a way we can then provide the parents tools to help the kids as they help them navigate, which is a very challenging and difficult time. And as our colleague said too, we help train the trainer. When Cassie's out there on the front lines supporting the kids, they're getting impacted by that. So we can go in and give them debriefings, and it's that third party. So one of the things I wanted to say too is how encouraged I am at the thoughtfulness of his rep committee thinking about who to fund. Certainly I'm super excited we're getting funded, but I hear all the other organizations you're funding, and it's all hand in glove. It works together well, and we need to be working together because ultimately that's going to make the community greater. One of our challenges, I'll be quite frank, of measuring our impact is how do you measure grief support? How do you, and we have a self-reported survey we use, but most of it comes, and it's part of my application was that we use that on a regular basis, and people reflect on their symptoms of grief, the physical, emotional, but there aren't really a lot of hard studies, except just one came out recently called Peer Support Services for Bereaved Survivors. This is a comprehensive, in-depth study about peer service, and that's exactly how we deliver our services. And one of the things I'll mention that it mentions in here as a highlight is that peer support appears to be especially valuable for survivors of suicide loss. Now, there's a lot more to be done, but that's what we know to be true through anecdotally, through the work that we do. And so I just am very grateful for the support. I came to CARA as a client myself after I lost a very important person in my life. And I've been part of the community now for 8 years, 4.5 of which is as the executive director. So I have a personal passion to make sure we're there for the community. And our services for our peer services are at no cost. And that's why the support from his rep is so important, so that we can always get. And I'll end with a quote. I was inspired by my colleague because I wasn't going to do that. But here's a quote from one of our families who took part in our youth and family services. She said, CARA was unequivocally the single most helpful resource for me after I lost my husband and my children lost their dad. And then she ends the survey with, I am so grateful. And that's really what we're able to do and help build resilience in the community. So thank you. I appreciate the recommendation, and I hope that the commission will accept the recommendations from the subcommittee. Thank you.
Sharon Hudson.
Hi, I'm Sharon Hudson. I'm with Vista Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And I just came to thank y'all for your continued support for Vista Center. I know y'all have been recognizing the growth of, unfortunately, people getting older, we lose our vision, our hearing, other things. And the growth of diabetes has also been leading to a much greater growth of vision loss than we were expecting at much younger ages. So even though we have hopes that medical fields will come up with some cures for some of these things, we have to deal with day-to-day crisis. And I realize y'all had the challenge of all these different organizations, and there's a lot of wonderful organizations in the area. Your extra support is helping us with doing our counseling and living skills, our core classes. But also one of the exciting things that's been really blooming for the blind and visually impaired is assistive technology. It used to be the equipment for assistive technology would be too prohibitive really in cost. For instance, if you wanted to scan and read something, you would be paying for a $1,200, not only the scanning, but the software program to go with it. And now that's something on your iPhone for $99, and it's an app that you can take with you. So we're being able to teach people voiceover and Zoom and all on their iPhones, and not only iPhone, Androids. I don't want to be cutting out Androids, because actually both companies are very good about making sure that things are accessible, and that's been a turning point for a lot of people at all ages. So I just want to say thank you. We're all very grateful for your continued support and for this extra funding that's going to make a big difference in our services. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. One last card, Pandora.
I'm Pam Dorr with Community Working Group, and we've kind of been tasked with figuring out ways to make the Opportunity Service Center self-sufficient, and it's been running at a deficit for quite some time, and through a strategic alliance with Abode Services, trying to find ways to do that. So we appreciate your funding support, and I know this is a pretty fortunate year where there might be some bond funding on the county side to continue finding the support that the center needs, but it's an important service in the community, and I think challenging to find support for it. So we do appreciate every dollar and your kindness in asking questions and trying to understand the complexity of it. So it's much appreciated.
Well, before we turn it over to a discussion, I just wanted to thank each of you for coming tonight, for waiting till we got to this agenda item, but most importantly for your work in the community. Every year we go through the process. Some years we go through it twice. But that doesn't mean that we aren't always grateful and just overwhelmed by the work that you do. So thank you very much. Discussion, and then we'll have a motion. You all have the committee report before you.
Well, I thought that I would maybe kick off the discussion by outing myself as the dissenting member of the selection committee. I thoroughly support all the agencies, as I said when I gave my oral report, but I did have a concern about the distribution of that last chunk of funding across CASI, Downtown Streets Team, and Community Working Group. My feeling is the three agencies all provide critical services that are really, really important to the community. I would have preferred to see that money distributed equally. I know this would mean CASI would take a small hit, but frankly, CASI is probably better funded and more stable than the other two agencies, and may have, more ability to fundraise the extra increment that you would be lacking. I think the other two agencies really do need the dollars, fairly seriously. So I can certainly live with the distribution that we officially recommended, but my preference would have been to, as I said, distribute the funds equally across the three.
Any rebuttal or any other discussion?
I'm blanking on his name, but who's the gentleman who comes from CWG usually?
Professor Barr.
Barr, sorry, thank you. when he came for his FRAP round one, he I don't know, painted a grim picture, but he basically kind of gave us a warning sign saying the money's about to run dry here. Can you give, and you talked about how you're trying to work through some ideas and work with Abode. I'd love to hear a little bit more about where that is, what the latest thinking is on I know the Opportunity Center obviously is so important to the community here.
So Yuri, can you please, thank you, of course. Prentice, we want to be able to hear you.
I appreciate the question. I think I'd love to tell you things are all worked out and it's pretty simple and we figured it out, but that really isn't our situation. We have, before going to the county, even if the county gives us what we've asked for, we have a pretty strong shortfall of about $60,000 we have to grapple with. And so where we are is still trying to figure it out. So I'd love to say it's all set, but it's difficult right now. And, sorry.
Because sometimes I feel I conflate the relationship between Opportunity Center and Life Moves.
Yeah.
How does that kind of work?
So what we're hoping to do is kind of streamline. Originally, Life Moves thought they needed 5 full-time people to do that work. We think we can streamline that down to about 4.5, just by economies of scale. But getting it beyond that, it would be pretty difficult. So what we hope to do is manage it better and also have less repeat clients coming through and hopefully moving people through that pipeline into permanent supportive housing more quickly. So a lot of clients have recycled, and we would like to see that change. So we're hoping to manage it slightly differently. But I think all of our partners have done an incredible job. And all we want to do is kind of make sure Abode Services adds to that and streamlines it, not adds another layer of complexity to it. So we're pretty cautious about every dollar we spend and want to make it really successful. We know how important it is here.
I have a question for you. Just the last time when we reviewed the proposal, we had a question about the diversity, about how to raise the funds.
Yes.
What's the situation right now? Does the group has a better investment diversity in terms of getting more funding?
Do you mean about the original endowment?
Original, yes.
I think there was some drawdown on that original endowment, which decreased its ability to contribute. So what we're hoping to do is create a more sustainable budget year to year, so we're not depending on that. I think there was such a dependence on fundraising, and if that happened, it was great. In those years where there was a shortfall, the endowment suffered. So there are some robust attempts at, and we've been pretty successful with some fundraising, but I think we have to find ways to make it sustainable. And it's one of those funny services where there is no income coming in from the actual clients. This really is a service, so there is no pay-for-service that we could develop through that. So it's one of those tough businesses that it's hard to make balance well.
I can respond to Commissioner Onan. The first round of his rep, I was one of the, I guess I was the dissenting voice of when we didn't allocate any money to CWG. I was uncomfortable with that. I think they're a vital resource. If that building goes away, 3 agencies are affected or 2 agencies. So I actually thought we should have given them more. So just wanted to say that. I guess my other comment is, I noticed because I was on the subcommittee both times, and this does not apply to all of you, but I think it's important to look at what are the measurable results you want funding for, because that's always seems to be, well, always. I've done this twice, but that was twice why I sent back something. I had that question. So I think that's really important when you're, how do you measure, what's our return on investment? We're making this allocation or we're granting the funds. How do we know that, we're getting that kind of return? You know what I mean? I mean, it's not a business, but just something to think about, that they'll come back if they don't have, if they're not really concrete measurable results. Thank you.
was just going to say, is there any more discussion? And it seems like there is.
Well, I wanted to share that a real challenge for the selection committee is that we're really bound by our responsibility to be good stewards of the city's money. This is the city's money coming from the general fund. And really a requirement for someone to be granted his RAP funds is that they have to be a financially stable organization. So it becomes kind of a catch-22 when an organization's in trouble and needs city funding, but then they don't seem stable enough. And we sort of have to go out on a limb a little bit here, and we have some faith, and we really do have faith in Community Working Group and in Downtown Streets that they will figure out a more sustainable long-term funding model. And I think we're kind of extending that olive branch to those agencies and hoping that they will take it and pull themselves up and be able to do great work with the food pantry and with keeping the day services open in the Opportunity Center, as we do feel strongly. But I did want to just share that that's a bit of a burden on us, too, in having to recommend funding allocations and then hope that you've got our back and we'll, fulfill that, for us, too, because it would be awful if we made a big grant and the agency went under and then the city didn't benefit from our investment in you. So that's part of the struggle that we come up with, but that's the reality of life. And some of the populations, I think serving the homeless and extremely low income population is very challenging because there is no way to easily raise funds or build a business model like some of the other agencies can, charge fees and do other things, and you guys don't have those options. So we're sensitive to that. And and so I hope that the recommendations that we've come up with will work for you and get you to where you want to be next time, and then you will share good news with us, which would be awesome.
May I have a motion?
Well, I would make a motion, and I didn't hear support from my colleagues per se, but I would make a motion to amend our recommendations to change the funding for Cassie, Community Working Group, and Downtown Streets Team to, I believe it was $32,600 each. That would be my motion.
I think it's 33,200.
33,200.
When I add up the 40, 25, and 34,600, I get 99,600. If anybody else can check mine.
Right. So I think now there would just be time for competent questions to Commissioner Onan and to see if she gets a second or not. And if she doesn't get a second, you continue discussion for another proposal or to go back to the recommendation that is on the sheet.
Okay.
Discussion?
So the one comment that I would make on the motion on the table is my initial funding recommendation for CWG was actually less than what the committee ultimately proposed. I quite frankly wasn't particularly impressed with their application. There seemed to be many gaps in it, and I wasn't convinced with the long-term viability of their operation. I did agree to $25,000 given the opportunity to leverage additional funding from the county. So I did want to present them with that opportunity. But at this time, I personally wouldn't be in favor of changing the allocation. I think Cassie does great work, and I actually recommended that they receive their full $50,000. So I would be remiss if we had to reduce their funding any further than what is recommended, than what is proposed by the committee.
Actually, now that I'm reading the fine print, I actually would agree with Commissioner Onan. I think I like the idea of raising CWG's, contrary to my colleague's opinion. I would be happy to raise CWG's funding. So I would go along with the dissenting view.
Actually, I'll go along as well because CWG, it's not, you cannot see the result. You have to go through other organization, which gets into a very difficult situation for you. So I think we need to set as a backbone to support the others. So I really think that's worth supporting.
I hear support. May I have a second? I'm sorry, Shelley. Any other discussion?
not to complicate things, but I actually, I agree with the diagnosis that we need to figure something out for CWG. I think, to be honest, I kind of agree with Commissioner Lee in that, I mean, first of all, I think that the difference increase of funding is not going to solve anything of the problem. It's actually on a pretty small scale increase anyway, and doesn't, the intention is correct, but I think the strategy is wrong. For them to get in a better place is much more dramatic than the ballpark $8,000 that's proposed from the initial proposal. And to the issue that you flagged, Commissioner Onan, earlier, that there is something about that, we are stewards of the money here, and to, in the list of funding sources, there's a lot of zeros in between in the categories. So I would actually, I don't know if I'm propose it, if it's proper order to propose a motion to accept as is, or do I just say sorry.
I would say at this point,
We're gonna
there's
vote
a
on that one,
second
okay.
to the motion. You can discuss the motion, and then at a point, the chair would take a vote. Either it goes forward, or it is moved down, and then you move forward with another motion.
So that's my comment on the current motion. As it
Okay.
stands.
I haven't commented because I'm struggling with the two recommendations. But your comment really helped me, Mehdi. I don't think that we could make enough of a difference in the community working group, and I think we could make a difference in the new program at Cassie. It seems to me that the community working group's proposal has dramatically improved from the proposals we saw a year ago, and I would encourage you to continue to work that proposal and come back to us. But as it stands, I would not vote for the motion that's on the floor.
I think if you just bring it to a vote, and then we'll be able to have that. So
The motion on the floor is to
first and seconded, and then you can just take the vote. That would be.
Ayes.
That would be to revise it for 33,200 for Cassie Community Working Group and Downtown Streets Team. That is the motion on the table.
All in favor?
So that's three. It's a tie. So if it's a tie, it fails.
Okay.
I move to adopt the committee's original proposal.
Second the motion.
Do I have to call for a vote?
No, I think you would have
Discussion.
just discussion and see if there's any movement, there are any compromises or so forth.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Does Cassie get school funding?
We do.
And then county? No,
No.
just school funding.
The overwhelming majority of their money comes from the school district, yes.
Let's see. We have a motion and a second. Can I have a vote? All in favor of the fiscal 2018 proposed budget as printed in our handout? All in favor?
Aye.
If you could put your hands up, I think that would be helpful. So we're still at 3-3.
Jury deadlocked. We need a mediator.
Oh, we let him go. We let him go. Rats.
Somebody has to break the tie.
As long as it's not Mike Pence.
We don't have a protocol, do we, for a tie?
You could go with both of them to the Finance Committee. They really, it's possible, they really would prefer that these kind of issues are worked out at the commission level, because then most of the discussion that night comes between mediating between the two HRC decisions or lack of decision.
At the risk of making folks wait longer, would there be any interest in us moving on to the next agenda item and coming back to this so that we can kind of let it sit a while?
I think I'd like to have the discussion and decision now.
Okay.
It's going to be hard later. I think I'd just soon do it now. I guess I would, as a commission, I would really like to take a position to the Finance Committee. And I guess I'll reframe what you said, Mehdi. We're not really talking about differences that are very substantial.
Well, if I can address that point, and I hope this is okay to say, so Cassie has applied for yet another HISRAP grant, and it has not been decided, nothing's set in stone. Is
An
that-
Emerging Needs Fund grant.
An
So
Emerging Needs Fund grant, which is also, though, a type of it's kind of part of HISRAP.
It's not part of HISRAP. It's additional, it's not part of HISRAP, no. So it's additional funding that the council has allocated
Okay.
at the discretion of staff with input from 2 members of the Human Relations Commission to meet new emerging or emergency needs in the community.
Okay. So thank you for that clarification.
You're
Because I was thinking of it as a sort of a HISRAP emergency fund.
So
but
they're
it's
both
not.
general fund
But they are both
dollars,
emergency.
but they are separate.
Right.
Participating in one does not preclude the other. Once someone does get an emerging need grant, they are not allowed to reapply for 3 years.
Okay. So a long-term,
Correct.
so a longer I view that I've been concerned about is if Cassie would get both grants, it would have double the amount that CWG is getting from us. And that, to me, widens a discrepancy in a way that makes me personally uncomfortable, because, as I said, I think all 3 needs are very, very vital in the community. So it may look like we're talking about some relatively small amount of money, and it may seem trivial, but in the end, one agency may end up being substantially better funded than another. And so I'm not sure that's the ultimate outcome that's best for the community.
I have another question about Cassie. How much funding do you get from the school district in regard to this whole project?
Application.
It's in the application. In the application, I didn't.
Yeah, it's around $650,000.
Okay, so.
You may respond to that if that is on the budget.
About 20, none of the schools fully fund, some of them do, but not all of them fully fund. So our program is not fully funded through the school district. So oftentimes we have to fundraise to close that gap. The specific numbers are in the proposal?
Yeah. Okay, that might be.
I don't have them memorized by heart because I don't have my budget in front of me, but they are in the proposal. But we do have to fundraise about 20% of the funds. And one of the things I want to point out is we have a very low admin rate for Cassie, that overall for our budget, it's less than 8%, which for a nonprofit is very lean. Our assets are these people here that are out in the front lines, and so most of what we pay for is salaries and benefits. It's basically our labor costs. So we have a very lean, mean machine with a lot of rock stars on the front lines, so we run pretty lean. So basically, those funds primarily go to salaries to pay our staff.
When does the Finance Committee meet?
November 7th. But I need to get my staff report in tomorrow. It's already
So we
overdue.
don't go home until-
If you do not make a decision tonight, this would push this out to December if I can get on that agenda, or maybe even into January.
I'll just say that the discrepancy over the amount and the increase, I think it's more symbolic. I think for me, it's about sort of, I guess, parity, that one organization that's a building is not more important than one organization that provides counseling. So I guess that's why I'm looking at it as, it's, I don't know, I just, yeah.
So I would agree with you in that respect, but I think there's a difference in the quality of the applications that were submitted and in the long-term viability of each organization. So while the service that both entities hope to provide are the same, or, equally valuable, I would say the deciding factor for me was the quality of the applications and the long-term viability. And so my recommendations reflect that thinking.
Yeah, I can understand that. I guess I forgive that. Yeah, CWG, you could do a better job with your application and your explanations, but I wouldn't. But I guess I think the importance and the value of what they provide trumps that, the poor writing.
Well, it's not just the application. Again, I think the long-term viability of the agency itself is not particularly strong. And I think the additional funding that they can get from the county will be more than sufficient to give them an opportunity to turn things around. I'm not particularly inclined to allocate more just for sake of parity, given some of the deficits that we've seen in their application and long-term viability of the agency.
I guess neither of us persuaded each other.
Unless one of the entities wants to give some of their money to
What's that?
unless someone else wants to give some of their recommended allocation to the other agency.
We keep hoping something brilliant will happen. Brilliant idea will come, but we are at an impasse.
Did the report that the committee provided, did it indicate the amount of funding that we might be able to leverage for the county? Was that number included?
Yes, it was. It was $100,000 from the county this fiscal year, and possibly the ability to meet the need of the deficit next year from the county. But those are all, this year the county was feeling pretty good about being able to meet that, and next year, staff was hopeful that they can make it happen, but obviously I'm not able to guarantee that, nor are they.
Sure.
But I thought during our deliberations that if the county was going to grant $100,000, that we were going to give a certain amount that was actually higher than what we're recommending now.
The county was asked, and they did not have a specific minimum grant amount requirement, for lack of better language, from the city to be able, for the county to be able to give $100,000. So there was not a specific
Okay, but I think we had talked about, we'd allocate this much if the county was going to grant $100,000, didn't we?
Well, my
Am I
impression was
missing?
that.
The county said there wasn't a hard number.
Yeah, there wasn't a hard number.
Yes, can you remind me what the process is for the emerging needs fund? Is that open-ended?
What do you mean, the process?
Sorry, for applying for money from the emerging needs fund.
Can you, I'm still a little confused. What do you mean, the process, how one applies?
Is there a deadline, or is it
There,
open-ended?
so if someone has an emergency need,
Yeah.
for instance, there's I hate to say a fire at this point, a theft of an important piece of equipment, they can apply at any time during the year. If it's an emerging need, something that's new come up, I always use the example, for instance, if there's an emergence of TB that was completely unexpected and the healthcare provider said, we really need to inoculate 1,000 more people, we didn't expect it, that's an emerging need in the community. That's a quarterly deadline. So our last quarterly deadline was September 29th, and we had one application from Cassie for an emerging need that they had, was presented to them that their organization was handling.
And so I apologize, emerging need as the less the languages, or is it emerging or ongoing? That's the language that's used. As in, it has to be something that we've seen an uptick in, or if it's like a continuously prevalent problem.
It was in response for service needs in response to the suicide. That was, and the increase in needs for services on the campus.
I'm going to make a proposal, and it's nitpicking. I just want to see if I can get us to a midpoint. I think you know my concerns. My objective is to come to an agreement so that we can go to the Finance Committee as a full commission. I want to support the three organizations in a way that gives them substantial predictor of success. And I do have some questions about the community working group's proposal, and I also value what they're trying to do. So my motion is that we fund Cassie at 35, community working group at 30,000, hold downtown street teams at 34,600, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maintain the recommendations for the other 5 agencies which have so well served us. It should add up to 99.6.
So could you repeat it one more time?
35,000 for Cassie, 30,000 for community working group, 34,600 for downtown street teams.
I would be supportive of the chair's proposed amendment to what's before us. I think it draws the 3 agencies into a closer parity. I think Cassie still gets a substantial amount that they requested and can hopefully make up the $5,000 shortfall. I really like the idea of giving more to Community Working Group. A $30,000 grant is more robust and will help them, I think, in their fundraising efforts, including with the county. It'll show a significant commitment on the part of the city of Palo Alto, which is what I think they need. Downtown Streets team would not be affected, but they still got a significant portion that they had originally requested. So I think all 3 agencies end up in a fairly good place, although I'd be sorry for the slight decrease to Cassie. But I think that they are better equipped right now in a better position to make up a shortfall than the other 2 agencies, which are struggling a bit more. And I think in that way, we would come up with, I think, kind of a just result.
I can live with that. I think that's a good counteroffer.
It is a very good proposal. I think that's okay.
All in favor? Can I move to a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Okay, you passed.
They don't have to go to finance anymore, right?
Actually, they do. So if this was the normal cycle, it would have gone into the Community Service Department budget. But at this point,
Because they changed it?
No, they still have to go to finance. Finance is their vehicle to council on this. So if they go to finance and finance is unanimous, then it will be on the consent calendar for council. But they do need to go to finance.
Thank you.
Before the agencies leave, I just want to iterate one more time how much I appreciate your work. And every time we go to council or to the finance committee, we say, this is the hardest thing we have to do, and I truly mean it. I think you all do fine work and deserve everything that we can do to help support you.
If I might just add also, council is very appreciative for all the work that you do in supporting the community, especially the vulnerable. I mean, you're the voice for them, so it's important to have that voice within our community, so thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
The other people who deserve thank you are the 3 committee members who struggled with this and made it much easier for us to proceed in our deliberation. If you hadn't done as much groundwork and as thoughtful preparation, we'd really be in a muddle. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, on staff's perspective, I want to thank the committee as well. Just like the one in the fall, it's just everybody came prepared, everybody thoroughly read the applications, had good questions, and I really, Mary and I both really appreciate your efforts.
You're welcome.
I noticed the community working group as well as the downtown streets with their food closet. They both offer food for their for the patrons. Does the committee ever suggest that maybe they coordinate, or, I mean, I don't...
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I know a little bit about that because I do serve Friday lunch at the church once a month for homelessness. And the lunch they serve for the homeless is well prepared, pre-prepared, and by a store in San Jose. They'll ship it there, do like hot food, so people come in and then we serve the food to them. And in the pantry, the closet is a different room attached to the church on the other side. So they gave them like cans, you know, not before to go. And then they really check them if they have the good status, see if they're qualified for getting that. They have records for it.
Right, so at the Opportunity Center, as Commissioner Chen said, so they Life Moves, they manage the meal program.
Right.
They also have, if you just drop into the day center there, they'll have food available. It's breakfasty, it's lunchy, but the food closet, that's kind of like getting a bag from Second Harvest Food Bank. So they get a bag for if you're unhoused, it's food that an unhoused person could eat without having to heat it. And then if you're a low-income person, and you're housed, they know that they can kind of give you a different bag of food. So there is some overlap. It's a different in clientele, not a different in time of day or circumstance.
And many of the food closet patrons are actually low-income seniors, like from Lytton Gardens. So that's sort of a slightly different population from maybe some homeless individuals or families who are dropping into the Opportunity Center.
Not dropping in the Opportunity Center for lunch. They drop in like 5 different churches in the area.
I'm sorry, I mean, through that program.
Yeah. Life Moves in charge of the program, so there's always one person, social worker there to supervise our volunteers for the service.
Before we move on to Agenda Item 3, I want to ask you to or call your attention to a handout at your place, items being considered for the HRC work plan for this fiscal year. It's a worksheet that may be useful as we go through Agenda Items 3, 4, and 5. I'd like you to think about the individual items that we have this year and your involvement in them and when we might do them. And I have 2 comments to make. One is that I just think this is a horrendously aggressive schedule for a year, but it's what we've talked about. And I would just like to be realistic and deliver things to some to the council, some to the community. Well, hopefully all to the council and all to the community. But I'd like to commit to the things that we can actually deliver, things that we support and things that we're passionate about, and things that we can add value to. We all contribute in different ways. Some of us are creative, some of us are fact-based, some of us have senior parents, some of us have bar exams. We all have different time commitments. So I'd like us to be realistic in what we can take on for the year and hopefully collapse this into a realistic and a meaningful and exciting work plan for the year.
One thing that I would suggest, we could collapse the, working on diversity and tech I think some of the CDAW stuff that Shelley and I are working on would cover pieces of that. So if we could consolidate those two.
That's great suggestion. Let's see. Let's move on to agenda item 3, a debrief of the council study session. We have no handouts on that. I just wanted to hear what people took away from that council study session.
Since I wasn't there, could you give a synopsis, or is that no problem?
I think we,
How do they like us?
They like us very much.
do you want to take on that, Teresa?
Oh, no.
Please do.
Come on, Teresa.
Well, I think this, to me, like two main things pop up. The first one is about finding a place for La Comida to operate. And that is a difficult task, I think, because I had talked to somebody in the church, and then I was told that there's some difficulty for churches to be accommodate the request for La Comida. That was one thing. The second thing is about finding the overnight parking place for those campers along the street in El Camino. So, they suggest we should probably look at in the ordinance by Santa Barbara and then find out a way to be able to set up our own guidelines to do that. Okay. There are many other things, please. I think those are the two main things that I thought.
Just as background, Commissioner Gordon Gray, because we don't get to say that much longer. We went through the slides that everybody helped prepare. They were well received. I think we were concise but descriptive. I had people from the community come up to me afterwards and say that it was a good description of what we'd done. They hadn't realized we'd done so much. So I think we got a lot of favorable input. The question I had going into it was we had an aggressive work plan, and I thought we were going to get called on that for being too aggressive, but instead we had suggestions added. And that's what I think we need to address tonight. Happy for the vote of confidence.
So that was a public event, I didn't realize that.
It was.
It was. Let me, if there's no other comment, move on to agenda item 4.
If I could just say one quick point. I was pleasantly surprised by the overwhelming support for some sort of action on the folks living in the RVs along El Camino. The chair would know that was an issue that I was particularly interested in, and we were kind of divided as to whether we should mention it during the council session. And so it was great that I think 6 or 7 of the council members brought it up on their own initiative, and hopefully they take formal action to refer that issue to the commission so that we can work with the city manager's office on that. So I was pleasantly surprised with that.
Now, do we still need a formal recommendation from the council?
I believe so. I'm waiting for direction from the city manager's office on this topic.
Let's move on to agenda item 4. You should have some slide copy in front of you. This was something, this is a draft that we'd like that comes from our ad hoc subcommittee, which at the moment is Commissioner Gordon Gray, Commissioner Alisani, and myself, with the help of Human Services staff and a summer intern. Some of this we went over at our summer retreat. We've developed it a little bit further to have recommendations. Our goal is, and this will actually be a vote on, I'd like to, one sentence at a time. I'd like to go over this, go through the recommendations for you this evening, and have a vote that we would take this to the council in December. So we would move from tonight's slide presentation to a staff report, to beefing up this presentation. Just to walk you through it, we're restating the resolution, talking about our methodology, moving from statistics, census data, to a community listening campaign, to looking at model programs elsewhere, some summaries of our findings. I'm going to move through this quickly, and I'll rely on you to ask questions where you have them. The listening campaign, we heard that some population segments feel unheard or misunderstood, the community is changing, and that there are model programs that we can work with, and there are partners that the city can use. I really am skimming this for time. I'd like to take you then to the recommendations. The committee looked at 75 to 150 recommendations. We had a huge sheet, and we went through them and clustered them into 7 areas and picked proposals from each area that we thought were valuable, doable, and would make a difference in our community. We didn't want to be a commission that makes a important, profound statement, but doesn't take action. So under immigration, we want to look at SB 54 and work with the city attorney to see if it addresses all the questions that we have. And at a subsequent commission meeting, we will develop those questions. One of the things we found was that the county is a huge resource to us, and they have a lot of training and media campaigns that we could leverage to increase the visibility of the immigration question in the county. So those are our recommendations for immigration. For gender identity, we want to assess the needs and assets of the LGBTQ community. This would be a program with the county office, and I've been speaking with the County Office of LGBTQ Affairs, and they're doing a 13-city survey and would be willing to include Palo Alto as one of those cities. Our responsibility would be to pick a date and a place and help with recruitment. And they would supply the food and the moderator and the program and the data analysis. I think that would be an important start to having a foundation to understanding how we could help families and seniors and employers dealing with gender identity. Third area that we wanted to look at was hate crimes. And our proposal there is to collaborate with the county on their hate crime reporting system and to formalize a policy for graffiti removal. We know that that is done reasonably effectively. No, that's not a fair sentence. We know that that is done effectively in the city, but it's not a formal policy. And do you want to chime in?
Well, graffiti removal is a formal policy. What was not in the policy was specific language as to removal of hate language. It was an informal policy that they would go out within 24 hours to remove any reports. And staff has, in dialogue with me, staff in that department has added that to their policy already. So really, this is already completed. So I provided feedback to them. So it's not my, I don't know for 100% if the top person has signed off on it, but they had a policy, they added to their policy, and it just needs a signature to to marry that new sentence into their existing policy for graffiti removal. And staff has always considered that to be a top priority during the week and on the weekend to remove any hate language or symbols.
So we took that as a win because it was something that was initiated from discussions that we were having with staff. Inclusive engagement is a phrase that we learned, or we've been using to talk about engagement of different ethnic and immigrant communities, particularly wanting the Commission to work with partners who are working on Welcome America Week programming. There are partners in Palo Alto who could help us make that week in September more visible to the different groups that live in Palo Alto. We attended a Institute of Local Government Leadership Programs, and one of the things we learned that Mountain View is doing is a leadership training for immigrants. And we'd like to mimic that here, and we think we have some partners we could do that with. The citywide diversity learning, it follows two independent paths. One of our commissioners had expressed interest in doing a program on the history of racism, the history of otherness. And we think that that would be a good program to, one, extend the Being Different Together program, and also helping with diversity training. The implicit bias, this isn't well written. It says seek communication tools. What we found with, in some of our listening campaign was that the language that we use includes people, but is off-putting. We mean it to be sincere and welcoming, but by our very definition, we make the other feel like an other. And we know that there are language and cultural adaptation programs that we'd like to investigate for our different city functions. And then finally, under gender, the major item is to direct the strategy for becoming a CDAW city, so that we can take a recommendation to council to become a CDAW city. I raced through that, and I want to open it up to questions and then ask for the confirming vote to go ahead and pursue further some of the programs.
So I think the area that gives me most pause is the hate crimes. Because as we've heard from the police department in the past, there's very, very little validated hate crime that occurs in Palo Alto. And I know I saw the slide about people have fears, and I know there's been racist and anti-Semitic graffiti throughout the city, but I don't know whether it should be called out to this level.
This is more that the county HRC has been tasked with county staff to work on this. So this is just making sure that we as Palo Alto, when calls come into the county, that we can be involved to a certain extent in the crafting of such a policy, but also making sure that they will allow, if we on a quarterly basis say, hey, how many calls have you gotten from Palo Alto? Can you distinguish the type? So this is not us doing anything different. This is us plugging into a county system that may be up and running at some time in the future, just to make sure they don't forget about Palo Alto, and there's mechanisms for us to get feedback.
When we were looking at some of the data, we found a difference between incidents and reported crimes and the fear factor. And we just felt like as long as the county was doing this program, it was too good an opportunity not to be part of it. So we had protective coverage going forward and a better database.
So the only other area that's missing for me, I think, is violence against women. We've had a lot of problems, both here and on the Stanford campus, with what's been called the rape culture, both in our schools and in our community. Domestic violence is grossly underreported in the community, especially against immigrant women who aren't aware of their rights or who are too afraid to call the police when it occurs. And I really support the CEDAW gender equality, but that may be very symbolic and a very middle-class kind of goal to fulfill versus the real experience of immigrant women in the community. So I wonder if under gender we can add something that really addresses violence against women.
Actually, that could come under a CEDAW ordinance. There's examples of cities that have created a special task force on domestic violence under the CEDAW ordinance. San Francisco is an example. So, and I can talk a little bit about CEDAW maybe during the commissioner reports.
Can I ask a question? Yeah, I look at it for the inclusive engagement here about expand Welcoming America Week. Do we have the week already set up?
That's a week that I think it comes from the Institute of Local Governments. That is a week that's dedicated in September. Oh, so we would just be doing programming during a dedicated week.
Right. Yeah, so there's an organization called Welcoming America.
Okay.
And their program is, they have year-round efforts, but a real effort in September to have Welcoming America Week. Every city does it differently. Some have huge multicultural festivals. Some of them are huge. I mean, multi-day efforts. It's my understanding that our local YMCA already does something for Welcoming America Week, and we could be in dialogue to see how we could amplify their efforts. I think we would, if this is something the HRC wants to take on, we would look at a very modest proposal. We're not going to have a 5-day multi-stage concert out there in the community, but I know there has been little ideas that have come from the HRC over the years. I know Vice Chair Chen has talked about like a once-a-year community welcoming day, in City Hall. So the ideas can be modest or grand, given your work plan. I think modest would be more advised, but it could also be an opportunity just to collaborate with other efforts that are already in the community. But the full depth of that is yet to be known.
If I can make one quick suggestion on that, when I read this initially, I wrote 4th of July. So if you're not married too much to the September timeframe, I would recommend trying to do something on 4th of July. It's a very American holiday, so kind of expanding that sort of definition to be as inclusive as possible, I think might be a good way to do it.
Although I agree with it, but September is the month
Yeah.
when the school year starts, and there are many newcomers and the children, they're enrolling in school, so I think this optimal time. I would think September will be more people, because summer people go away for vacations.
One of our objectives as we were doing this was to look for partners. So I think we could take that suggestion to a partner and see what they were doing. I know we have some time constraints. Can I have a vote to flesh out these recommendations and bring them? Let's see. Can I have a vote on the recommendations?
Need a resolution? Or can we just vote?
I think you need some kind of motion that these would be the recommendations that you would want included to go forward to council. So there would have to be HRC agreement on on these, or if the subcommittee, if there's concern by commissioners for more nuancing of this and to bring back to the November meeting, that's your choice as well. That would push off, we still have to see if we can get on the December agenda. That, that would definitely push you off till the January timeframe. So I think there has to be an agreement to what is here. And you can also decide if you want to give this full package just to get the council an idea of what you're working on. Really what you're bringing to council are specifically to request them to affirm SB 54 and to direct staff to complete a report for CDAW. The rest is in the commission's hands or in staff. And when we say staff, it's primarily Mary and myself, but there also have been some good collaborations, like I said, with the graffiti policy, that's Public Works. For some of these collaborations with our libraries and the Arts Center, such as the program that was presented to you or the grant opportunity that was presented last time. So I think in your report you would show all those, but perhaps at this point what you need for your recommendation is just the two items that are going to council.
So could I recommend that we have the pass along the immigration matter to council? I think on CEDA, before we recommend that they direct staff to do anything on that, I personally would like to put some more time and work on that. Maybe we just give them an update that we're working on it, as opposed to having them direct staff to do anything at this point in time.
This would be a December
yeah,
recommendation.
yeah.
Is that too soon?
I think for CEDA it would be.
Okay.
Unless you disagree, John.
It's going to be up to you.
Yeah, I feel like I need more time to.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then it would read, update staff on the options for a CEDAW ordinance.
Yeah.
Well, you can just give an update that says this is something that's on your work plan, and this is something you intend to bring to them.
Yeah.
But at this point, you are not prepared to give them a full briefing. At that point, you would be bringing it to them as a standalone, which might be a better way of discussing the matter anyway. You'd have to be pretty specific for, if you're the SB 54, I mean, you have to think about the discussion that you're going to have with them. If you're just saying, you kind of gave them a flavor at this study session, but if you're going to give this to them, at that point you have to decide, are we just asking for more feedback, or that's nice? I think you kind of did that at the study session, and at this point, part of it is the report, but then the recommended motion part in your report to council would be something specific, some recommended motion for SB 54. So you'd need to decide that, and that would have to be in the staff report.
My sense is that going to the council with just the immigration issue is perhaps an unfair use of their time, and we should wait until we have better footing on both recommendations to council. Can you give us direction here?
I agree with you. I think if you can get as much done as possible, that'll be
Right.
a lot better than coming with one by one. Yeah. And I know the maker of that resolution.
He wants it back soon.
Yeah, and that was the pressure point for me. I really wanted to respond at year end, because the resolution was passed at year end, and I wanted a response. But I also don't want to abuse the council's time by coming in once and then coming in a second time.
We appreciate all the work that you guys are doing on this and all the thoughtfulness that you put into it and the research. But I would recommend coming back with a bigger packet, a more complete package.
Okay. I think that's a good
My
recommendation.
impression, though, that is that the SB 54 and the CEDAW, they're both kind of big pieces on their own. And so while they all tie into this, inclusive community resolution that the council passed last year, it seems like it would be a lot to try to introduce both of them at the same time. And I would be hesitant to have SB 54 be held up waiting for CEDAW. So my personal recommendation would be move ahead with SB 54 as sort of part one of our response to the inclusive resolution. And then when CEDAW is ready, because it's such a big piece in of itself, that would be part two. I mean, pretty much everything the commission does could fall under the inclusive resolution. So I'd be hesitant to try to lump everything together.
Right. When you say CEDAW won't be ready in December, what is the package that you're trying to complete?
Maybe I could weigh in here. This boils down, I like to boil things down, and I have done a lot of research on this, but there's basically three components to it that I think would satisfy the requirement to be a CEDAW city, which is, and we talked about this last time, you have to do a gender analysis. Out of that, you might make policy recommendations, and then you have to have some kind of a task force to monitor the outcome of that analysis. So here's an example that I was given. You look at all the commissions across the city, and is there an equal representation of men and women? So let's say, for example, there's more men, or the planning department, which gets a bigger budget, has more men. That might be an outcome. I don't know that's true, but I'm just speculating, or I'm just imagining. And then you would say, okay, so there's an inequity here. What policy change are we going to make? And then you have a task force. It could be a subcommittee. San Francisco has a women's commission. Maybe the city should establish a women's commission. We don't have one. The county certainly has a commission on the status of women. The county is going to pass a CEDAW ordinance by the end of the year. So they're actually working on that. Supervisor Cortez is leading that charge, and the Women's Policy Office is carrying that out, and the Commission on the Status of Women. But basically, if you come up with one analysis, that could satisfy the CEDAW ordinance. And it doesn't have to be something that's going to be, hundreds of thousands of dollars and take 6 months. It could be something as simple as that. And then, you could appoint a subcommittee within the commission, or recommend that the council establish a women's commission or some kind of gender commission to monitor whatever the outcome of that analysis is and whatever policies come out of that. So the bottom line is I don't think it has to be something that's so, heavy laden, and takes forever. I mean, it'll take some time, but I think there's a simple way to do it if you wanted to, present that to the council. And I have this all documented, and I'll send it along. And good luck to you.
And I'm just doing some more thinking about what really works with that, because, I would say, and I would value Councilmember Ku's opinion, but I think I would agree that bringing two totally separate items, one immigration, one's women's issue, that's two complex conversations to them. And when you had the study session, they had no supporting documentation, they had no staff report on it. It just, hey, this is something we're working on. It sounds good. Thanks for working on this. Looks like you guys are working hard. I think the difference if we just bring a general report and having the staff report providing, a couple good paragraphs and background information on your efforts, but more thoroughly a little bit on SB 54 and CEDAW, for them at that night to be able to say, yeah, that's interesting. bring that to us at a later time. I can't imagine any circumstance in which we brought this back to them at that night, they would say, yes, we're going to do something for SB 54, and yes, please staff, create this committee to do CDAW. I think it would be too much, and I'm not sure council member who wants to add anything to that. That would be my concern at this point, so it would be it would still be that middle point. So it would still be, Commissioner Lee would have to get enough to have them have an initial conversation to understand it, and then direct the HRC to do anything more it needs to do. I might need to talk with city leadership to get a better understanding of how they'd like to handle that, but yeah. Thank you, Jill. Not sure if you have any more council.
I didn't realize that it was such a big chunk of topic that that's gonna come back to council for discussion. But if SB 54 is gonna need a lot of discussion, then I agree that it might have to do it in 2 segments. And then it sounds like CEDAW, you're kind of waiting for what county is going to do, see what they're...
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
But it would be, we wouldn't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel if we see what they did, but they...
But this would be something new that kind of...
We have a resolution. We have a CEDAW resolution, but we don't have an ordinance. It doesn't have teeth, it's more symbolic.
I guess, but how does it fit into the resolution of this one here?
It's our way of
about
addressing gender.
Gender
in the
as,
city.
Gender.
as inclusion, gender, inclusion of gender. That's how it's also, it's also a way to drive good governance. They said,
So not just have action behind what we're talking about rather than just having words and no action behind it.
Yeah.
Right,
Policy.
Right, that was one of the goals of the subcommittee, in that they did not want to bring something forward to council that was just symbolic, because the resolution was symbolic, and they wanted to say there are things that staff can do to live this out, there's things the HRC can do to live this out, but we want to bring the subcommittee wanted to bring items back to the council that went beyond the symbolic, that by affirming something that would perhaps have a change in the way the city operates in whatever topic they're talking about.
Yeah, I'm still thinking that, on this subject, it might be something that is much better to come back with both and have it kind of come to a robust discussion on both, and then have it move forward, because it has taken quite a bit of time.
Right.
And I'm still feeling that way, but, it's on your work schedule, and you guys have quite a work plan here.
Well, when we talk about this strategy, because I was thinking that you've identified that we needed to do a budget, a need, and a monitoring. I guess I thought the presentation to council would be more of an elaboration on these are things we're doing. You wouldn't have done the budget analysis, you wouldn't have done the need analysis. But it was a strategy to go forward. Am I incorrect? To either one of you?
You're saying we would go to council with, here's what it cost, here's an example of a gender analysis, here's what's going to cost. Is that what you're saying?
No, I think she's saying that you would go to council and say, to have a CEDAW ordinance, these are the 5 things the city needs to do. These are what other cities have done, but these are the specific requirements of what they are.
That's what I was trying to say here.
Right.
But I don't have any budget. Yeah, I don't know what this costs. I could not get anybody to tell me what they cost.
So,
I think every city that's
so
different.
I'm a little confused here. It looks like it's very much overlap in our proposal of doing, of our, passed for this year.
Right.
It is. So it's a two together, huh?
No,
Yeah, I
it's just,
pulled one from the other.
Oh, okay, so,
One of the outcomes of our recommendation for the council resolution is to pass a CEDAR ordinance. And it just so happened that it's also, part of our work plan.
oh, so our recommendation here, that means we are going to recommend to the council that we're going to do it. Is that right?
You're right, I took a leap of faith. That,
That's
if
because
the
it's
rec-
overlapping.
Yeah. These are the work
Can
plans.
we do it?
Do we need to be able to tell them what we would like the CEDA ordinance to look like at that point in time, or just that we should do some sort of CEDA ordinance?
I was thinking the latter, just that we want to do it. This is the
Oh, okay,
benefit of it,
That-
and this is what, and it's,
Okay.
so that it would direct us to work on it with staff's help.
Oh, okay, well, and that,
I think,
I'm sure,
I
yeah.
think I kind of spelled it out in here, so maybe, but I know, we should have probably made some time in the
Yeah, because
agenda for this.
I'm not
but,
on the subcommittee, so I'm totally confused, but I think that I'm not clear. So that's what we're going to do. See the end of this. We recommend to the council member for HRC to do this.
no, you would not be bringing that other sheet, just if,
It looks like overlapping.
well, it is overlapping in that that's the HRC's work plan, and if you're working on something,
Oh.
there's different buckets of what you're working on, and these items fit into one bucket, so they end up on your work plan. It's not that you're, there are other buckets on that sheet
All
that
right.
you'll be working on as
And my
well.
question is, can we work on this and everything together?
That's a discussion for the next discussion.
Which you might miss, Commissioner Gordon Gray. 'Cause that might
I
have to be
thought
tabled.
it's on today's agenda. We're going to discuss, what we're going to do next.
That's next.
Let me just try this. These were the recommendations of the subcommittee, that we work on 7 areas of focus, and that we have some requests, 2 recommendations to council, some recommendations, 2 policy recommendations to council, some programs from staff and commission in those areas. There are a lot of other things we could be doing, and we might come back to them another year or subsequently, but this is where we wanted to start. And I'd like to ask for the commission's support.
I guess
to
the
take-
problem I'm having with it is, some of them are kind of vague, they're like, almost like
It's-
placeholders,
yeah.
but the ones
Yeah,
that
I
are...
have more text, and I skimmed over it because I knew that we were getting late.
Okay, I guess, even though I was on the subcommittee, but the ones that look most concrete are CDAW, SB 54, the hate crime reporting system, the graffiti, which is already in process, and I feel like the other ones are more exploratory and still need to be concretized. I guess that's where I'm having, that's my opinion. Do we have to vote on all of them, or?
No, you can't vote on the ones for staff because the commission is not able to direct staff to do work. Staff is doing this as part of our work plan to further work of the Office of Human Services, or further the work of library program. So you cannot specifically
Okay,
direct
so it's
staff
just the
to work.
commission then.
You
So
can
just the-
make a
all right.
referral to council, and you can decide or not decide to work on the stuff in the commissioner column, or you can schedule that into your work plan for this year and incoming work plan. So it may not look like this when it goes to council.
No, it definitely
This won't look like this, but it was just to give you an idea that there's responsibility and opportunity in different sectors, in those 3 sectors.
Are there particular questions you have of the work for the commission?
Because I'm the only one who does not involve in this. So I am totally lost, but it's okay. I don't vote.
Let me
Well, I
try.
mean, if Commissioner Chen isn't voting, then we don't have a
Yeah.
majority to, right, because we need 5 out of 9, but we have, wait, one.
You
we have
need
enough
4
people.
out of 7.
7.
The others aren't here, so you need 4.
Okay.
So you
Abstain. I'm not voting on this. I don't understand it that well.
Can I,
Okay, then, yeah,
can I take another attempt at explaining what we're doing?
I understand what you did, but this things I still don't understand. The commission, that means we vote, if we agree that commission, we can do all this. And then I don't think we're going to be doing this, plus what we're going to do in our priority together. It will be too much work for us to do. So while we are voting this, we recommend it to the council to do this, or we are say, oh, this is what we're going to do. That's my problem.
You've hit the nail on the head. That we have a very aggressive work plan for this year.
Yeah.
Right, and not all the things that are on the commission list are things that are going to happen this year. So if you look at your work plan, these are the different items. Chair Stinger put these all on here to give the commission an idea of everything you've suggested so far that you have interested in the items here. The next item on your agenda is to really say, okay, what can we reasonably do this year? This list might be half as long at the end of tonight, or if you continue this to your next meeting. So these are, as Chair Stinger said before, for instance, on this one, explore being different together into new themes. What that really means on your work plan was an idea.
It's all in here.
It's all here. So you all need to make a decision what is possible to do. And that is separate from a motion to go forward with these 2 items for the council. Really, your motion only has to be whether you as a commission support bringing these 2 recommendations to the council or not.
The 2 being SB 54 and CEDAW?
Right. And you have to feel comfortable with the results of this report. I think the report would very clearly, lots of reports, when you study something, bring forward a whole plethora of recommendations and observations, and they usually very clearly state, which ones, staff or a commission are going forward with. So you can mention these things and say, we noticed this, but we don't have the bandwidth to do it this year, or there wasn't. So that's the kind of thinking that goes on as you transfer from one document to the other, or you transfer to this document to what you go forward with council.
So in this sheet, what I understand is that recommendation for 7 categories, 7. And that you're talking about only the first slide, immigration, gender identity, and there's some other things as well. Right? 1, 2, that's 4.
There's 3 categories.
Yeah, but this is for 7 categories. It's right here in the slide here, the first slide. Programs, policy, recommendation fall in 7 categories. So
Yes.
this one, it's immigration, second is gender identity, and then there's follow hate crimes, inclusive engagement, and et cetera, citywide diversity, learning, implicit bias, and gender. So there are 7. So are we recommend just the first 2?
Because we were looking at programs and policies
Okay.
that would forward our city's inclusion
Okay.
and outreach. And some of these areas really didn't have policies, so there was no need to ask council to take anything to council. We would address gender identity, for example, with a study that the commission would do with the county.
Wait a minute. You said programs, and then
And programs we don't need to take to council, we only need to take policy.
where are the programs? Where are the 7 categories of recommendations? they're not identified on this
Yeah, they are.
slide.
There's some overlap, like the LGBT.
Immigration, gender identity, hate crimes, inclusive
Yeah, I know.
engagement,
But-
those add up to 7.
But they're
So
here.
there's 7, but there are policies or recommendations.
That's why they're or. The policies are the 2.
Oh, okay.
And
so,
the rest are,
All
the
right, so
rest
it's not-
are programs.
So the first 2 are programs, policies.
The only 2 policies are SB 54 and
Okay.
CEDAW.
All
The
right,
rest
so it's
are
not labeled,
pro-
so I got lost.
Okay, yes, they are not, the policy ones, they are listed under council, because it's the responsibility of
Okay.
council
Okay.
to pass policy.
Okay, policy.
And the HRC has the authority to recommend policy to council for their consideration.
Okay, so the 2 policy, we don't have to worry about it. We have to worry about the rest of others.
Well, you do have to worry about it in that you have to prepare the staff report and defend the request for those 2 policies to council.
In addition to that, there are 4 programs we need to work on.
Well, that's up to you to decide this year
Okay.
which ones you would like to work on. These are just identified from all the research that was done. These are the ones that the commission, the subcommittee identified.
Are all of these on this column under the commission, are they all on the work plan? Most of them are, right?
Yeah, they are. That's what I wonder.
Yeah, so so we already agreed to this work plan.
No, you didn't.
No,
You just,
we have not.
this is still draft.
So
This
if
is
we don't,
just
we have
for your
not agreed on this,
consideration.
how can we do recommendation? We have to agree on this first, and then we can do this.
Yeah, I did this after the council study session. I went home and thought, it's just way too aggressive. I just needed some way to capture
So why don't we
everything.
just toss it out and do this only?
But that's not the full work plan. That does not, this does not include HISREP or CDBG
Oh,
or
okay.
your liaison
Yeah.
relationships
Well,
and so forth.
If I may.
This is part of this.
Yes.
I think we're conflating a lot of different things here. So
Yeah.
let me try to simplify a little bit this agenda item. City council passed a resolution
Yeah, no,
about
I
being more
understand
inclusive
it, yeah.
community, okay?
Yeah.
They sent it to the HRC to see what can we do to fulfill this resolution. The ad hoc subcommittee, along with city staff and an intern, did research on what different communities do. We listened to members of our community
Right,
about what
right,
were their
right, right.
complaints, and we came up with a laundry list of ideas.
Okay.
Some of those ideas are policies, which need the approval of city council. Some of those ideas are programs, which we're going to do, which we can make our own choice to do that, and some of those things goes to staff to look into.
Okay.
What this is, the goal of this agenda item is to figure out if we as a HRC want to send to the city council the 2 policies which need city council approval.
Oh, okay.
The 2 policies are SB 54 and CEDAW. So those were the 2 primary policies that came out of the research about that we think would go towards the city council resolution. So that's the only thing that I think we really need to focus on right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah.
Don't worry about the work plan, don't worry about anything else, just these
I
are
know,
the 2
it's
policies
just like
that we need
really,
that we need
yeah,
to.
yeah.
So is the recommendation that in December we say to City Council, these 2 policies, we would like you to have staff work on these, or are we going to have specific policies for them to adopt in December? I think it's the first one, right? We want to look into these 2 policies. How would we do that? Wait.
Correct. This is the point I made on the call that I think we recommend these policies generally, but obviously I think the city attorney would have to make sure that the city is able to do it, be compliant with it, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah.
Okay, well, if that's the case, then I'm okay with saying we would like to do CEDAW. I mean, we don't have the CEDAW ordinance ready for them to pass in December, but if we just want to get that process rolling, then I'm fine with that.
But for the chair, if that's what.
No, thank you, the clarification was very accurate, and thank you.
So
Clear
we're basically
thinking.
voting on the 2 policies that we want to present to city council whenever we decide to do that. Is that what's on the table? Are we ready to make a motion?
Yeah, we're not agree about whatever we're doing yet, but only the policy, only the.
Yeah, we haven't fleshed it out, but those are the
Yeah,
2
yeah, yeah.
categories.
Because those are, we have to decide on what we're going to do this year before we can say yes.
So I'll make a motion to authorize the chair to bring forward the SB 54 and the CDAW policies to council at the next available meeting, so December possibly, asking that city council give us the authority and resources to explore implementation of these two policy topic areas.
I second the
If that's
motion.
not confusing.
I think it's more about the proposal, not an implementation, right? We're not quite at the implementation
No,
stage.
no, so request that city council direct the commission and city staff to explore how we can
Research
and
what it
implement
takes to
Yeah.
become a CDOS city.
CDOT city and SB 54.
Okay.
Yeah.
In that case, I second.
So I want to clarify this. You're not saying, telling this council that we did all the research and this is what we recommend. No, you just like bring it in.
These are two policy categories that we'd like to
work on it.
work on
Yeah,
with the
just
city's
work
help,
on it,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
not a complete report yet.
No.
No, and that's important for two ways. We're going to need staff help, and we need council to
To
say
authorize that, yeah.
Yeah, because you don't have resources to do that.
It's directing the commission to work on it with staff's help.
Or the other way around, but however, to
Sure,
get the
yeah.
job done, whatever it takes.
Yeah, it may take another year.
Yeah.
Any more
I mean,
discussion?
I
Go right to a vote.
I would place the heavy lifting on the commission with staff support as opposed to the commission supporting staff, because I know that their time and resources are limited.
Okay, hold that sentence.
Yeah,
Because our capacity is limited also.
that's true, that's true.
But for now,
Yeah.
our first recommendations, if we vote yes, we're taking two recommendations to council to give legs to the resolution that they passed in December 2016.
I'm sorry, say it one more time.
The vote is whether we take these two policy recommendations to council.
Okay. With the understanding that it's going to be fleshed out and we're going to come back with specifics, and how does one adopt a CDOT ordinance, I guess.
Yeah.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
A lot of trees here, Mary. A lot of trees. Yeah. But you recycle them.
So I will first apologize. I think I took that too quickly because we've been working on it so long, and I was
Yeah.
worried about time, and I apologize for not setting that up. But at the same time, I want to thank two commissioners, Commissioner Alessani and Commissioner Gordon Gray, for all the work that's gone into this, and staff has been on top of it, and thank you both. So,
So now we have to look through the work plan.
you can tune out here.
What's that?
You can tune out.
Oh. I'm still here.
But if we look at everything on here, we have some things that fall out of programs from the council referral. Some things that came up in the council study session. The first two, senior nutrition and overnight parking for RV dwellers, are really complex issues. Asking to sit on the commission that studies the Cubberley Plan initially is probably just a liaison assignment, but will involve work. Identifying new funding agencies, something we haven't done before. We have community conversations on the table, community dinner, online cyberbullying. I think you're right, Commissioner Lee. If we can move that to
Yeah.
CEDAW, that would be helpful. We have some tactical items. The website, I think that includes the welcome letter that we heard tonight. We have some details to sew up from being different together. Commissioner Lee, you've suggested several times that there's a recognition we'd like to give to a particular event. And sometimes our commission meetings come after, don't allow us time. So if we had a calendar of events, we could just develop that and send it to...
Yeah, let me just put that together and...
That's an easy one.
Yeah, that's an easy one.
And then we have our core responsibilities. So I'll start. I think maybe given the hour, the easiest thing might be to say, if the worksheet is clear, maybe everybody could just take it and come back with the areas they wanted to work in. Does that make sense? 'Cause I think to do a group consensus at this point without all the commissioners here is futile.
I second that.
I thought we had decided in our retreat who wants to do what. Did we have a table last time?
Yeah, that was I think, brainstorming session at that point.
Yeah, and I thought we had some sort of thing.
We did.
Yeah, but this is another one. We should do it over again.
The reason that I'm suggesting that is we never really we never really synced both ideas. Just everybody had an idea, and we were defining it and explaining it, but we never put it into a work plan, what quarter. Never thought
Oh, I
through
see.
how much staff time we were taking.
Right. Right.
Or if people will, let me try another way. If people can email me the topics or
It's
items.
dangerous we do that because a lot of things people may not want to take on, some difficult and complicated subjects. So, I mean, this...
I thought I could do a draft if I knew what people were interested in, and I could then come back so we could see what's covered and what's not.
Right. I think in doing that, the danger that
Nobody
you
else
run
is-
into is people wanting to do their individual projects. I think
Yeah.
if people, either that's a collective conversation, or when people are looking at this, they are really truly being inclusive of understanding of, the core projects need to happen, but, what are our, two priorities this year as a commission? And you identified that as fostering community conversations and gender equality. So if you identify those two as your two focuses for the year, then I think you should probably tier it and say, okay, our tier one would be, tier one is your core responsibilities. Tier two is those two focus areas that you had and reasonable projects that are under those. If those you can all get covered, let's look at a tier three of maybe projects that people want to do, because if everybody picks their projects they want to do and none of them fall under those two focus areas, then you haven't reached a goal for the year. So that would be a suggestion that I have.
The only amendment I would make to that is that we had ideas of fostering community conversation going forward for this year, but we didn't factor in when we said that finishing the council resolution. And so I see that as a priority.
I hear you.
So I would consider that a priority for the year. at least some of them.
Well, then
So
that
for
I
me-
would consider that Tier 1 core responsibilities and items that are continued from the previous work plan.
If we look at Tier 1, core responsibilities, pretty much have coverage, Council Buddies, his rep in CDBG, we know that we'll fill those when the deadlines are announced in the new year. I'll take responsibility for finishing up the resolution. I'll take responsibility for gender identity. And that would be Q3. And the Welcome America would be Q4. I'll do that.
So you're asking commissioners to pick the ones they're going to work on? Is that what we're
Yes.
doing
Is
right
that
now?
From the first beginning, council referral items, is that, you're working on that, the first part?
Yes.
Okay.
The overnight parking for RV dwellers, that you can put me down for that one.
Where's that? Oh, I thought it was the first, we were working
Well,
on
I
the
mean,
first one.
she already mentioned that she would take most of those.
You can take most of this, so we're out of hope?
Yes.
So we don't do this, right? Wonderful.
So that would be based on a council or referral.
Yeah.
Senior nutrition, there's a lot of background there, and I know it's
so, I don't know how to tackle that problem.
I don't either.
So,
I'm not sure what added value we could have. There's been so much work that's been done. The only thing that might make sense is to look at how other cities do it, how other communities do senior nutrition, or to see if there's an interest in opening up the discussion again to have one kitchen supply North and South Palo Alto, or work on a shuttle, or maybe put together an ideal program and invite the parties to discuss it. I just not sure what we can add to the current situation that hasn't been already attempted.
Yeah.
So should we cross it off? I feel like we should get some velocity here.
Yeah, I'm waiting for...
What is that Cubbley plan? Yeah.
That was a recommendation from Councilmember Phil Seth
How can,
that
I didn't get it. Okay.
the HRC have be included in the committee, in the task force for the Cubberley plan.
Okay.
So that's really a liaison opportunity.
Okay, what's Cubbley plan for now?
That's a master plan for the Cubberley site, so that is a site owned by the school district and part of part of the property the city owns, so the school district, city's on a long-term lease, and they're looking at if the school district makes a decision, if they're going to reclaim the property, having discussions regarding what that may look like. Is it just a high school? Is it this grand plan of multiple sectors and agencies using it? So it's kind of a community plan for, a master plan for the Coverly site.
How is that an HRC?
Well, I think the HRC, because the HRC has the insight of knowing the needs of nonprofits in the community. I mean, if it's a site where people say, let's just have these kind of groups there, and the HRC, well, we know nonprofits, there are, groups that need, maybe could be co-located with other groups. I think it's good you have the ideas of human service agencies, child care providers. I think looking at it from a different scope, not just a nuts and bolt lease agreement, of looking how it could be, a multi-use center for the community, or how the school and the city might use that property together.
And that's
I was not part of the last process, so I am speaking not with the clear knowledge of it. As you know, I am at Coverly, and part of what has made that center a wonderful place is the mixed use of groups that are there. And there are many that are interested in seeing that continues, and understanding the perspective of different types of groups in the community. And I think that's what the HRC would bring.
There's also a large number of senior groups in there.
Yeah.
There's the stroke.
Yes.
The stroke organization.
Cardiac therapy.
Yeah. So, in developing that master plan, is there opportunity that it can be a senior wellness center? And then what else can we put in there for the youth? What are the different groups in our community that might need it, and in a universal way, so that it can change with the times? So that's something that, if you can, if the HRC, the committee can kind of bring to us how you see the best use for this location. It's one of our last locations where we can do something for the community. And that's a very important aspect. And, the schools are involved in this too. So for the youth, the fields, what are things that's going to kind of keep them kind of engaged and give them a space to be at? So, things like that.
I think the Abanitas location, temporary location, has driven some interest in having senior services in downtown, in South Palo Alto as well as downtown. And so there might be some ways to explore having senior activities. And we could represent that if we had a seat at the table. I think it was an exciting idea.
I'd be open to being one of the liaisons to that, since I imagine that process is going to take a long time, and I'll be living here longer.
Yeah, that's right. You could do that. I'll be retiring.
Yeah.
I thought you were retired.
I would, another kind of retirement.
Okay.
I will tentatively explore senior nutrition to talk to the parties who are involved, to see if they're open to a different approach. Otherwise, I don't want to continue on it.
I mean, maybe you keep it simple initially and have them do a presentation of some sort?
No, you have to negotiate with what they want and then what we can provide. Okay. That is the situation. I think they're very clear what they wanted. It's not we could provide.
Okay.
On the shuttle part here, considering for shuttles, maybe explore also, where are most people coming from that need the services for the shuttles? And also, for people who are functionally disabled, who have functional needs, wheelchairs and that sort of thing. How easy is it for them to get on and off the bus, where they're going? Right now, I know that there are people who are not, seniors who are not going to Stevenson House for lunch because they can't get onto the buses. It's just a problem for them to catch the shuttle, put their wheelchair on, and, there is not even a space for shuttle, on the shuttle for their wheelchairs. So we want to, maybe perhaps you can look into that part of it too.
Thank you. But I thought we also look into the possibility of La Comida in two places.
That's for the long-term plan, right? That is a long-term plan. Although, for the shuttle, there is immediate need if we want to have more folks come and for all different walks of life.
So how we can find out about that? We have to go into the shuttle bus situation, ask the companies?
No.
I think that's beyond the scope of authority of the HRC. It's just really understanding needs to pass on to staff that they may not have realized, and to share those implications. I mean, the city has just completed a pretty extensive shuttle survey, which, thanks to staff and the HRC, got a significant amount of seniors to respond to. I think, given the situation of, La Comida right now, there's, probably some additional questions that could have been asked during the shuttle survey, or when the HRC went out to talk to seniors that might have been interesting in this situation. The wheelchair issue I have heard, but there were a lot of implications or a lot of suggestions that the seniors came up with during that survey that was passed on to the consultant that would make, that we already know that would be positive for seniors if the city would be able to, staff and find the funding, hopefully through VTA, to implement some of those recommendations that are already out there.
Given the time, I'd like to suggest that I type up what we've said and recycle it for next month. I have a question on agenda item 6. Since we didn't make an agenda change at the beginning, is it too late to table that? Community recognition?
Yeah, we can just move to table it.
Yeah, you can just say they decided to move that to the next agenda item due to time.
That's wonderful, we
Yeah.
have time for that.
Council does it all the time.
Yeah.
They get tired at 2 a.m.
We're not allowed to go past 11,
Should we postpone number 7?
Yeah, I was gonna
say, why don't we delay number 7 till next?
Okay, I'd like to table number 7 and have you come back next month. No, I don't want to.
No worries. It's only a 2-hour plane ride. Well, here, I'm going to give you this. Why don't you, I'll email you, but, yeah. you can
I
talk.
just really want to thank you.
Oh, to see you. This is number 7.
This is number 7. This is your chance to glow. You started in high gear with the domestic violence program. You helped me out through Being Different Together. You really paid your dues on his rep multiple times, and I really appreciate it. You've been a great commissioner, and we'll miss you.
Thank you. I miss all of you. It's been a hell of an experience. I'm going to take it with me to Arizona where they need it.
Are you going to apply for the Human Relations Commission?
They have commissions in the city I'm in. We'll see. They have an environmental commission. That might be an option, but yeah, it's been my privilege.
I've talked about the things you did. I also need to address your approach. You're very creative, and you're also very efficient, and I envy that. You've done a lot. When we take CDOT to council in December, we'll owe you a lot for that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
I also have a proclamation from the
I'm off on
mayor
my
on
new
your
office.
behalf for the event that you were unable to attend a couple weeks ago. The HRC was well represented, well lauded by Councilmember Koo, so I just wanted to give you your copy of this
you.
proclamation.
This will go next to my PhD. No, I don't. My new office. Thank you. Flattered. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for all you taught me.
We have cookies for after the meeting.
Oh,
Or
let's
maybe
move.
even now, we did it. Oh, even now, so. We'll start with you. Oh, holy moly. Look at that, Mary.
Oh my God, this will get me home.
Okay.
To your own former home, not to
That's
Arizona.
right. That's right. Of course, if I eat 2 of these, I could.
Right. Commissioner reports?
Take 2 of these.
Council liaison report?
So we really appreciated you guys coming in with your presentation with what you're hoping to do this year, and it's a very aggressive work plan. And so I just want to say that through this year, I've been very honored to be part of this, learning from all of you. Each and every one of you have so much to share. And so council shares the same appreciation. So I just want to say thank you and keep up the good work. And all the best to you and your
Shelley, you
new,
can call me that.
Shelley, yeah, I was going to say your long name,
I
Gordon
know.
Gray, Commissioner. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Staff report, please.
I didn't have anything. The only thing that I was going to pass on, which I did via email, was the notice of the colleagues' memo going to council on Monday night regarding renter protections. I've heard from Mary that got moved, didn't you say?
Oh, yeah, it was at 7:15.
It's 7:15 now, not 9:45.
That's good.
I have a note from Greer. That says that the voice of the HRC could truly help move forward an issue that is close to our hearts. I think it would be wonderful if you could mention that and encourage members of the HRC to attend on Monday night to show support. So since it wasn't agendized, we can't ask somebody to speak for the HRC, but as individuals, if anybody can attend Monday night, that would be great. I will also.
I had a meeting scheduled for that time, but I can reschedule it.
I might be able to
That'd
come.
be great. Items for next month?
Am I allowed to ask them to refer it to the commission or no?
You can.
Or say
You
that
can
to
just
the-
say, I am a member of the HRC, and we are very interested in this issue, and we are at your service,
That works.
you know, blah, something to that effect.
I really appreciate that, because it is such an
Yeah.
important issue.
It's coming Monday, right? Let's see.
Items for next meeting, November 10th?
The one that we have.
Using plan the
We discussed this recognition policy.
No, we tabled that.
That's for next, we'll do it in November.
And then continue, talk about the priority. That's 2 things.
And update on immigration and CEDAW.
Can I suggest that we, either at the next one or the following meeting, we put this amnesty thing on the agenda? If he's come to us in August and October, or at least refer it to a committee to discuss.
How are we going to do that?
I mean, we could have someone from NOC come and do a presentation on it. I mean, given that he's come twice, I would like there to be some
I think
action, even if it's just a presentation or referring it to a committee.
I think it needs to be on the agenda.
Okay, yeah.
And on the table is November 15th. Our meeting is November 10th, so we'll do a final update on the table.
Mary also mentioned that usually in November, you talk about what you'd like your December gathering to look like.
You know, it's everywhere.
Okay. Hardcore, thank you all.
Thank you. Move to adjourn.
Meeting adjourned.